sure. So what you been up to, man? I guess you're revamping Seed. That's all I know. I know you're revamping Seed. I have not heard you talk about Seed in a long time. So I thought it'd be cool just to hang out with you tonight and just kind of figure out what is going on with this project, because I've been wanting to watch it for a long time, and I have yet to have been able to watch it or buy it or see it on TV. So what is going on?
You and me both. You know, you may know, and some of your listeners may know as well. I was a missionary for 6.5 years, and I left my full-time, good-paying, six-figure job back in it was April 1st of 2010, and to do Seed. And it was an idea that I had in my head back in 2009, actually 2008, but started writing stuff down in 2009. And I felt like I got a tap on the shoulder, and God was saying, hey, you want your dream back? And what he meant by that was I had laid my dream of filmmaking down in August of 2003. I chased that dream for a long time, and it ended up with me being broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and living in a Dodge Stratus ready to put a bullet in my head in 2002. So I laid that dream down and said, whatever you want, I want, and, you know, I'm putting my stuff aside. You know, you tell me where you want me to go. He made me a filmmaking missionary for 6.5 years, traveling to about a dozen countries. But in 2009, he gave me that tab. He said, you want that dream back? I'm like, no. He says, why not? And I'm like, well, because it hurt too much last time. And he said, well, that's because you did it your way. What if we did it my way? And I said, well, what does that mean, Lord? And he said, what do you think we've been doing for the last 6.5 years? And what he meant by that was, when I was in the corporate world, we would meet with the client, we would script out whatever the story is that we're going to be telling, and then we would storyboard it and then shoot with intent and have it edited in a couple of days and a final product out. In the missionary world, it wasn't like that. It was like, hey, Rob, we need a video for Albania. Cool. What's it about? I don't know. Get on a plane. We'll send you there. So fly out to Albania. And, you know, I would shoot something 40 to 50 hours worth of video because I was just shooting everything. But it was one of those deals where I'm like, okay, Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing here. You're going to have to be the writer, director, producer. I'll just be your camera guy. And he would go, hey, look at that. I'm like, whoa, shoot it and be like this amazing scene, you know? And then when I come back and I look through all that footage, the footage itself would tell the story. It would just, and I was limited to 7 minutes because that's all a church will ever give a missionary to show, you know, that's the amount of time that they have to show their stuff, you know? So I'd have to find 7 relevant minutes of a story. And basically my mandate was to make people cry and give money. You know, look at all whatever's going on. Oh boy, we got to help the missionary. Here's the money. You know, it was essentially what my job was.
Well, we both got a Baptist background. We both know how that works. We've both seen the presentations. Right. The boxes of tissues are already in the pews. You know. Right. Oh yeah, I get it. I get it.
The envelopes are ready to go.
Yeah. That's how it works.
And so, but what I learned in that was just let it go, you know, and let him direct my paths, you know. And when he said you want the dream of filmmaking back, I was content. I loved what I did. You know, I was getting paid to travel the world and do all kinds of cool stuff, meet great people, and be a part of advancing the kingdom. It was amazing. I could have stayed there forever. But he said, you know, I know you've got visions. I know you got dreams. I know you got ideas. And, you know, if we do it my way, you know, why don't you step out in faith? And that was a hard step for me to make because I had only been married to Sheila for 2 years, you know, and trying to build a family and all that. And stepping out from a good paying job with full benefits and all that to ideas scribbled on a napkin, you know, with nothing there to provide anything. That was a huge leap of faith. I mean, it was like Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade when he steps out over the cliff there. There's nothing there, and he lands on the invisible platform. But one of the things he had me do was go to Arizona. And the reason was because I had written something in the script about my character. He's in Iraq. They're there in 2002, which is sort of before the official time we were really there. And something happens, and it's a sci-fi story. So, you know, weird stuff happens. And he's zapped out of time and space in December of 2002, and he reappears. And I was like, in 2010, I was like, I don't know, where do I want him to reappear? And I had all kinds of ideas. You know, from my various journeys, the things that I've seen in different countries. I'm like, well, and for whatever reason, I was looking on Google Earth, and I found this really bizarre looking location. It was about 2 hours north of Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. And I was like, man, from Google Earth, it looked really bizarre. So I went with it. You know, I wrote it in there. And then I had written, well, you know, he needs to find somebody he trusts. You know, if it was me, who would I go to? I'm thinking, well, you know, I'd go to my dad, you know. So I'm like, okay, where does Zach's dad live? And so, you know, I'm looking around on Google Earth and I see Tombstone. I'm like, oh, that's just cool, Tombstone, right? Well, Tombstone is just sort of off to the east of Fort Huachuca. And if you start looking into that particular army base, there's a lot of wild stuff around that base, you know. And so, you know, these are all just ideas I had. I'm writing them down. And then it was the week between Christmas and New Year's. I was still at my job. I got an email from Delta Airlines saying, hey, you've been traveling a lot. You got a lot of sky miles. You better use them or you're going to lose them, you know, by the end of the year. I'm like, oh, wow. So I told Sheila, I said, you know, Delta wants to give me a free airplane ticket. I've written all this cool stuff about Tombstone and Tucson, Arizona and all this. I think I want to go location scouting. So she says, yeah, go for it. So the email was Monday. I was on a plane on Wednesday and was there for 5 days. And it was like an Abraham Moses type experience, and where like crazy stuff happened that you can't script. I mean, you can't make stuff up. I mean, it's just crazy things happen. And my normal writing pace, creative writing, is 3 to 5 pages a day, typically. After that 5 days in the wilderness, it came back and I wrote 17 pages and a half a day and outlined this 72 episodes of a TV series, like in one day.
Back up a second. You said your creative process allows you 3 to 5 pages a day. Are you talking about just like script writing or like blog content too?
No, blog content comes out like Niagara Falls. Because
I was gonna say you write like 3 to 5 pages a second on Facebook.
I like
so
3 to 5 page comments.
I was going to call BS on that. You were like the comment king. I have never seen somebody write more posts and attack like and defend more comments than Rob Skiba. So I just wanted to make sure that we were on the level.
Yeah, creative fictional writing, because I gotta make that stuff up, you know. But it's funny you mentioned that, because what happened was, okay, I do this location scouting. I end up writing, you know, the real nuts and bolts. The first episode outlined all 72 episodes for 6 seasons. And, you know, the more I was diving into it, and this was in the time when I was really first getting introduced to people, the work of people like Steve Quayle and Tom Horn and L.A. Marzulli and all those guys. I'd already been studying the Nephilim for a long time, but had only just found their stuff because of something I was searching online. I don't remember what it was. It was the supernatural super package deal or whatever. You know, Tom Horn's like the king of package deals, right? And it was
really
like he really is. Oh, and they're great deals too. I mean, it was like like 3 books and like 4 CD box sets and like, you know, 6 DVDs or something crazy for like $100 or whatever it was. I was like, oh my God, this is a motherload, you know. So I got all that. And actually, I got it right before I got on the plane. It arrived right before I left for Arizona. So I listened to a lot of it while I was out in Arizona. So I'm like, okay, as I'm writing all this stuff out and outlining the series, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I can't do 72 episodes. I don't want to do 7. It'd be crazy to do 72 episodes. I mean, Gene Roddenberry, you know, created Star Trek, but he only wrote a few episodes. I mean, you have a team of writers. Chris Carter, same thing, X-Files. You know, the creator of the series usually writes sort of the central mythology episodes that keep the whole continuity together, but then you have all kinds of other writers involved. So I'm thinking, man, like, if I get other writers, I'm going to have to make them like sit down and read every book that I've read, listen to every CD box set I've listened to, watch every video I've watched, or I could try to distill all of that information that's pertinent to my story into 1 or 2 resources of mine that I could say, okay, you want to get into my head, writer? Here, read this book or watch this DVD. Now you'll understand where I'm coming from. Here's the characters. Here's the central storyline. Let's get creative and have fun. That was my initial thought. And that's what led to the writing of all the books and all of the DVDs and stuff. But what happened was I produced a video talking about when Yeshua was at the base of Caesarea Philippi, at the base of Mount Hermon in Caesarea Philippi, and who do men say that I am and all that. And I was correlating the movie Rocky, actually the first one, with that whole discussion. And I'd posted it online in Facebook groups, discussion from Randy Domain. He's also another Nephilim guy. He had written a book and he was posting in some of the Facebook groups, and whatever he said, the video that I just made went along with what he said, so I posted it. Well, this guy, Doug Riggs, saw that video, and he has like everybody in the world on his email chain. So he pumped my video out to like everybody. So the next thing you know, I'm sitting at home doing research, whatever. And, just to be frank, I'm in my home office. So, I'm just in my underwear, just kicking around, And Tom Horn calls me. Now I'm like freaking out because, for me, that was like, George Lucas calling me or, or something, I'm like, what? I got like all his books on my bookshelf right here. And, Sheila comes in. She's like, who are you talking to? I'm like, talking to Tom Horn. Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
I would do the same thing.
Oh, man. I was totally geeking out, Anyway, he was impressed with the video and stuff, and he said, listen, he and Russ Dizdar and Sharon and Derek Gilbert and a few other people are going to be speaking at a conference in Ohio, and he invited Sheila and I to go. So I'm like, okay. So I went there and then got to know them a little bit and hang out with Russ for a little while. And next thing you know, they're asking me to speak at one of the first Future Congress. It was like one of the first big conferences with all these guys, and they gave me like 3 hour and a half long slots. I'm going, I don't have a clue how this just happened, but okay,
okay, hey, I want you to tell this story, Rob, but back up a little bit, because I don't know if you know, but the Supernatural Science and Prophecy Conference is a conference that I put on.
Oh, okay. Was that the one? Were you there?
Yeah. That's where we met. That's where I met you
the first time. Okay.
At Russ Dizdar's house.
Yeah, that's right.
We were eating cake or something, and I met this guy there, and you told me, everything that you're talking about now, the whole seed thing. Of course, I'm a wannabe filmmaker at that time, and I'm like, oh man, here's a guy, man, and you had the vision and everything, and I was just blown away by the things that you were telling me. And as soon as I left Russ's house that day, I was on the phone to my film buddy. I was like, oh man, I met this guy who was a trip at Russ's house, and I told him all about seed and all this. And I remember from that first meeting with you, I was like, man, I want to direct one of these seed episodes, man. I just started thinking of an idea of how, because you explained it that way. You explained, okay, the story's going to go in here, but you're not going to do 72 of them. You're going to find other people to do them. I was like, man, I got to come up with something to pitch to this guy. I'm going to come up, and I was driving home, thinking about that day, but that was the other side of the story, for me. So it's just kind of interesting. So many years later, here we are, talking again, but, and it's awesome, exciting to see that, that seed is still there, even though it's put on the back burner for a while. And we're talking about it again. So that is
well, and I get the impression seed has just been marinating, because I watch your progression, and so like my own impression is that like whenever seed comes out, like it's gonna be wild, like everything Rob Skiba's learned over the last 20 years, just boom, right into science fiction. I love it.
Boom, that's exactly right. When you first met me, Tom, I was like, I want to make seed happen now. I had like all of 2 scripts written, in rough draft format, and was like, yeah, it's got to happen now. And I even pitched it at the Future Congress in one of the lectures I gave, trying to get people interested in, because I realized I can't do this through a studio. If I go through, people, any studio, Netflix, Hulu, 20th Century Fox, pick one. It doesn't matter, Sci-Fi Channel. They will censor me, control my content. They would have the ability to own the rights, cancel it prematurely if they're not getting the ratings they want or whatever. And I've gotten hooked on way too many cool TV shows that got canceled at a cliffhanger. You're like, we're never going to find out what happened to whatever. And I said, the only way this will work is through crowdfunding. And, at that time, nobody knew me. I didn't really know anybody. I just so happened to be given a platform, to be put in front of people. But that really took off for me. And next thing you know, I'm traveling around a lot. And I'll tell you what happened with my radio show, because this was all around the same time. I really wanted to get into the head of some of these other guys. And other than meeting them and chatting at a conference or something, which, there's a lot of other people and they, their time is limited. I thought, well, if I create a radio show and call these guys or email them and say, hey, listen, Tom or whoever, I heard you got a new book out. I've got a radio show. Would you come on so I can promote your book? Well, any author is going to say yes, because that's what they want. They want to get the word out, right? Well, I mean, for me, it was just a selfish way to get a hold of somebody and talk to them for 2 hours. That was what it came down to. And right before we went on the air here live, Jared, you were talking about how, you guys were joking about how you guys talk too much sometimes in your shows. And that was me, because here I got LA or somebody, on the phone here for 2 hours. And I listen to my old shows now and I'm like screaming at myself, like, shut up, because I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Hardly giving the other guy a chance to talk.
Yeah, there's a guy that listens to this show. His name's Chris Taylor. He's got his own show called Don't Let Him Burn. He called me the other night. He got something that John Pounder said and something I said confused about TV shows. So he called me, and he was telling me about stuff I was saying in the show that I didn't say. So I was totally lost. And then I was like, are you sure I'm the one talking about this show? And he said, yeah, you know how I know? And I said, how's that? He's like, because you talk more than the guest does. And I was like, okay, so you call me, and you tell me that I'm saying something that I'm not saying, and then you burn me. And I was like... I was like, thanks, man. Good friends. Good friend. Right there. Good friend.
That's awesome.
Funny dude. I love that dude, though. He's funny, man. I've only known him for a short while, but they're super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's how my radio show started. It was because I was just selfishly trying to find a way to talk to these other guys, pick their brain a little bit. And, it was cool for a while. What's unfortunate in Christianity in general is, for whatever reason, when somebody comes up with something that somebody else disagrees with, the initial response is, let's split and create a new denomination. That's why we got 40,000 Christian denominations. All of them believe that, Yeshua or Jesus, if you prefer, is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. They all believe that, for the most part, I would say. But, it's pre-trib rapture, or it's this, or, they got to fight about something and split off. And what I found, even in the research community, is that's still the same way. And, for me, it was pre-trib rapture initially. I came out, and at first I was just like, I was hardcore pre-trib. But then I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think so. And it was one conference we were at. We're all at a table. It was like Doug Hamp, L.A. Marzulli, like everybody. The whole Prophecy in the News Club at the time was at this table. And we just kind of sit down, and Doug just right off the bat goes, "So, Rob, where are you on the pre-trib rapture issue?" And I'm looking at like everybody around me. I'm going, oh man, this is an ambush. So I'm like, all right, I got to use the bathroom first, because I know this is gonna be a long conversation. So hang on, hold that thought. I'll be right back. And I'm in the bathroom just praying. I'm like, God, help me here. So I go back and I said, first of all, I want to know why you're asking me. And Doug says, well, because to be honest with you, I'm looking through scriptures and I'm really struggling with it. I'm not sure it's really supported. I'm going, what? So, we get into this conversation. Well, all of a sudden you start noticing people looking at you differently, because this whole camp is like pre-trib, and shortly thereafter, boom, I'm kicked to the curb. Doug and I start this show. We do Quest for Truth. And it was episode 17 and 18 where we start talking about it. 17, I was coming out pretty hard against it. And he was just kind of quiet. On 18, I said, okay, Doug, I'm calling you on the carpet here. I spilled my guts in the last one. Where are you? And he said, you know what? I got to say, I don't think I'm on that page anymore. Boom, he's kicked to the curb. And it's unfortunate. I really hate that that's the case with a lot of this stuff, because my initial purpose for Seed was, I love these guys. I love their research. We don't all agree. There's a lot of stuff I don't agree with these guys, but I still love them. I love their research, and I promote them all the time and talk about them all the time, even though we have disagreements. And if you look at the earliest drafts of my scripts, I was actually writing them into the story. Like the dude's hitchhiking and he gets in a truck and he's with an 18-wheeler, guy picks him up and he's listening to like a coast to coast type of show, but it's like Tom Horn or LA or somebody, from an actual interview, and I had them scripted into the story, because my thinking was, if I can tease the audience with these other guys' stuff, and they realize, because science fiction people, they're like totally I mean, I'm one of them. We get into whatever the show is. I mean, you have Star Trek conventions, just get married in Klingon and stuff, you know. People love whatever it is, you know. So my thinking is, if they love Seed and it gets popular, then people will start to realize, wow, wait a minute, some of the little things that were in the background are actually real, and they'll Google, you know, Tom Horn or Steve Quayle or whatever, and next thing you know, they're going on the path that I went on, you know, back in 2005 or 6 or whatever it was when I first got introduced to them. That was my thinking. You know, and I may still do that if they're willing to still participate. But yeah, after 2010 and the stuff wasn't really, you know, Seed wasn't really taken off, I said, okay, well, I'm just going to dive into the research and do more of it, start publishing more books and doing more stuff like that. But in the process, what happened from, I want to say 2000, really from 2013 to this year, is I built my audience now to the point where I've got almost 85,000, I think, subscribers on YouTube. Man, 25 something, I forget how many I got on Facebook, and who knows on the radio. At this point, I actually have the numbers that would be required to do a crowdfunding ask. You know, and I'm close to being ready to do that ask. I'm working with a guy, Rick Hummer, as a good friend of mine, to do like a 20-minute overview. Here's Seed, here's what it's about, here's what we've done, here's where we're at, here's what we want to do, here's how you can help. And hopefully that'll happen sometime by, you know, midsummer, I guess, we get that video done. And
hey, quick rabbit hole. I don't know Rick. I've seen you guys, you did that the Lake Michigan experiment, which is cool. But does he do like a TV show or something? Because I saw something where he was like going to a restaurant. Like, who's Rick? And like, what does Rick do?
Yeah, he was a radio personality for quite some time, I guess, out in LA, and he knew like everybody, and was just feeling uncomfortable with the whole scene and its conflict with his faith and whatnot. And so he's now in Indiana, and this is how I met Rick. When it was 2013. I'm still frustrated. I'm like, I got to raise the money, and I'm going out to LA. I made several trips out to LA, and just as an aside, there have been people who have been supporting Seed, in some cases for years, you know, $3 a month or whatever. And I just want to, first of all, thank everybody who believed in the project, even when there was nothing to the project, you know, and who stuck with me all this time. And just so you know how that money has been used, I have spent many trips going back and forth to California, networking, talking to cinematographers, talking to writers, brainstorming with writers, writing scripts together, trying to meet executive producers and producers. So that's where the money has been going. And this office, I mean, it's nothing huge, nothing super fancy, but cost me $600 a month. So, but it's a professional environment. So when people come here to Dallas, and I've had many meetings right here in this room, it's something you got to have. You know, I can't bring them to my 2-bedroom apartment. You know, it's just not cool. So that's where the money has gone for people who have, you know, wondered where's Seed? We've been contributing, you know, whatever. Well, that's what's happened. But when I was sitting there going, man, all the producers, everybody I talked to out in California, they're all of the Hollywood mentality. You know, give me this, give me that, and I'll take it to so-and-so, and we can get some investors. Well, I mean, investors and all that's great, but then you have to deal with the ROI side of it, you know, the return on investment, and they all want it. And I'm like, I want Seed to be self-funding. So whatever returns come in, I want to funnel it back in, you know, and the more returns, the better, because the bigger the budget, the better we can do, you know, more especially. I just went and saw the Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2. And I'm going, I wouldn't even know how to direct something like that. It's like crazy, that movie. But I mean, these guys have hundreds of millions of dollars to play with, you know, and the credits.
You spend an hour watching the credits after something like that, just because of everybody involved. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and you know, a TV show, there's a lot of TV shows that I like, but you know, I'm more in the sci-fi genre and superhero stuff. I love like The Flash and Arrow and stuff like that. Well, I mean, even on a TV budget, most of these TV shows are in the $2 to $3 million per episode range. Some more. Lost, the pilot episode of Lost, I believe, cost $10 million just for the pilot episode. So, I mean, this is just what it costs to make this stuff. I mean, you see the names at the end of the episode. you know, you got to pay. You first got to find those people, and then you got to pay those people. You know.
What'd you think? This is a show where we don't care about rabbit trails, so I'm curious. What'd you think about the ending to Lost? Were you a fan? Yay or nay?
Oh man, I was a fan up in hardcore first 3 seasons. Season 4, I was kind of like, okay. I think they lost it in 5 and 6.
See, I liked it, man. I'm one of the only people I think in the world that really liked Lost, like through and through. And I can't shake it. I gotta just admit it.
Hey,
I love Lost,
ground, bro.
1 through 6. I loved them all. Yeah. I loved it.
6, you know, I didn't hate it, but I gotta tell you, I was watching at the same time I was watching Lost, and I never saw it when it was on TV. I was watching it on DVD box set, and I wasn't even interested in the show at all, but people keep telling me, like, dude, man, this is right up your alley. You're going to love it. I'm like, okay, all right. So, you know, I saw season 1 at the store and I bought it, and there's like 4 episodes per disc, you know, and we got hooked, Sheila and I, like immediately, you know, and this was when we both were working a full-time job, you know, at East
It was
West.
Like magic, man. When you watch that season and they introduced the hatch, I mean, you just
wait. Man. And the numbers, you know, we finished every episode. What I loved about it is because they would have the show taking place in the now, but they're always flashing back to events in the past, and they would always kind of leave you on a cliffhanger about the future. And that's the comic book format. That's how comic books are formatted, and that's how Seed is formatted. And so I loved Lost for that reason. But we'd watch an episode, and you know, it'd end with a cliffhanger or whatever, and we'd like, want to watch another one? Yeah. So we watched another. We'd end up watching 4 episodes a night. It'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, oh god, we got to go to work for 9 o'clock in the morning. You know, Lost made us insomniacs. But I mean, I totally loved it. But at the same time, I was watching Lost. I was watching the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and the difference between the two, you know, Lost was 6 seasons. Battlestar was 4. Battlestar knew the end from the beginning, and they wrote toward it. I have a feeling Lost got lost making Lost because I don't think they really had a solid ending in mind when they started it.
Interesting, because I thought that they did. I thought I had heard that what's the guy that did it? J.J. Abrams. He was part of it. He helped write it, I think, right? JJ, I thought that they had all 6 seasons planned out, but they may not have. I don't know, and they could have said that. But you don't believe, even if they said that it was true.
If they did, it was not as coherent as I would have liked it.
I didn't make it past the I didn't make it to the 2nd episode of season 2. I was done. I figured out the game. I'm like, dude, they are making this a cliffhanger on purpose to keep me up all night. I was like,
why do you have to be such a downer? That's the best part of the show, man.
That's why you like it.
Yeah, I know.
You gave up in season 2. Oh goodness!
You know what I love? It was like a crackhead quitting crack, dude. I was like, nope, I'm done.
What I loved about season 2 is when they brought Echo, the character Echo, in. Mm-hmm. It's like this big black dude. He always had this walking stick. And this is what I loved about Lost, was like they showed you a lot of stuff, but they never told you anything. And it drove you crazy. You're like, what's the numbers? What's the hatch? What's the foot statue? You know, you're going crazy trying to figure all this stuff out. And they drug you out forever to tell it to you. But that's the hook. That's what keeps you intrigued by it. Well, Echo had the stick, and a lot of times they would just show him off in the corner over there carving something. You know, okay, what he's carving in the stick, but what's he carving? I don't know. Well, when they finally showed it, and I forget what episode it was, but they did like an over-the-shoulder shot looking at him carving his stick, and it's only like a 1 or 2 second shot, if that. But he was carving scripture addresses, and so you're like, whoa. So what does that cause you to do, especially if you're watching it on DVD? What causes you to pause, hit rewind, and pause and look at it and going, okay, why is Echo carving, you know, Leviticus, whatever, you know? So what you go and grab your Bible, you open it up and you look it up. I'm going, that's brilliant. That is so awesome. You don't need some dude with a bad Southern accent going, you know, the Bible says, and blah, 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 like in every Christian movie you've ever seen, you know. You just something as simple as that it's related to the story, never overt, but it actually caused people to stop the video and go open up their Bible just to figure out what Echo's doing.
Yeah, what was that? It's kind of, it's like you know, one of the biggest problems I had with that show though was the fact that in 6 seasons Hurley gained weight. he's stranded on a desert island for the longest time. They don't have food. They're not getting Dharma Initiative food crates dropped down, and the dude is still like gaining weight on the island. Like I call BS on that. That's my biggest problem with the show.
Totally. That is a continuity issue right there. So yeah, I'm watching all these shows and I'm thinking, oh God, I want to get Seed out so bad, and I don't want to do the ROI thing and investors, and I got to get crowdfunding, but I don't have enough people that are needed for it, and blah blah blah. So in 2013, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this point. I had several scripts written, and I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at what I have in my office available, and I'm going, well, I've got some pretty decent microphones. I've got a pretty decent editing system. Why don't I do an audio drama? And, you know, I used to love the old audio dramas. In fact, sometime around that time, I got introduced to the BBC. They had done all three of the original Star Wars movies as audio dramas, but they were elaborated versions of the movie. So, you know, the movie's 2 hours long, but the audio drama is 6 hours long. So, yeah. I mean, they really put a lot into it. And I was really impressed with how they did it. And, you know, I listened to it. I'm studying how they're doing it. And I'm going, this is awesome. So I thought, well, I could do an audio drama. So this is how I met Rick. I posted on Facebook. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing an audio drama with my first script of Seed. And I created like bios for each of the characters. You know, here's a little picture of a real life actor that in my head I see for the part, you know, and, you know, characters like that, and a little bit of blurb about the personality, whatever. Well, if you scroll down the page, there was, in fact, I probably still have it up on my website here somewhere. Kaz Daja was a fallen angel from the Book of Enoch, and he I had in mind this lizard-like character that would, like, his S would be like, you know, serpentine, you know, when he speaks and stuff, and so I gave the description of like what he's like, but I had this whole sheet, and I'm like, if you guys are interested and would like to audition, you know, here's the page to go to, here's the information to go to. Well, it was like either the next day, or very shortly, I think it was the next day after I posted that, I get this email with an MP3 file in it, labeled Kaz Daja. And I'm going, wow, this is crazy. Like, you know, somebody's submitting their demo reel or whatever. And I click on it and I listen to it. And Rick had taken the whole scene that I had written. There's Kaz Daja's like torturing this guy. So he plays the part of Kaz Daja, the fallen angel, and the victim, and he put sound effects to it and music, and he sounded like a demented Vincent Price doing a lizard like guy. Like, he sounded so awesome, so perfect. And this is my first response, you know, like right after I put this, and I'm going, Sheila, check it out, check it out. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, wow. So I contact him like, dude, you knocked it out of the park, man. This is unbelievable. So he's like, wow, I'm glad you like it. We start talking. And as I'm listening to him talk, I'm going, man, you know, this is a great part for you, but you've also got a really good narrator voice. Would you be interested in being the narrator for the audio drama? He goes, yeah, sure. So as we start doing the narration, you know, and getting to know the guy, he's got like 1 million voices. He can do like anything. So if you actually listen to the audio drama, he plays the narrator and like 2 or 3 other characters in the story. This guy from New York, like this kind of Vin Diesel type like character, he plays him, and this other guy, Master Sergeant Calhoun's like this Michael Clark Duncan character, like this huge black dude from the bayou, you know, from Mississippi or someplace, and he sounds perfect for all of them. So as a result of spending a lot of long nights doing recording, and you know, he's out in Indiana, so we did all with Skype and stuff. It was amazing. And some of the other actors too, they were from all over the place. This other guy, Martinez, he had a very short part, originally scripted, but I love the guy so much, I gave him a whole bunch of new lines I wrote specifically for this guy. This guy was so cool. And he would record, I don't have my recorder with me, but it's this little Zoom recorder. He had a little Zoom recorder, and he would record in his car with me on his phone, Skyping to give him directions. And his car was like a natural sound booth, you know, and it would sound awesome, you know. So it was really a labor of love. If you look at what went into it, I mean, if you could see the rest of my office, this tiny little, 14 by 12 office, couple of microphones here, you know, and Skyping with other guys. And then the way it finally came out in the end, I think it came out really, really cool.
It's it's just like such a grassroots project, the story, you know.
Totally.
I mean, it's so cool because it works. I mean, it works, obviously. You got awesome content, but it's just the story behind it. It's like I don't know, for lack of a better term, the rags to riches kind of thing, you know? I mean, just scrapping together like Rocky 1, you know, the history of the making of Rocky 1, just a bunch of ragtag people just making it work somehow, you know, and it just becomes a big deal.
Yeah, and the synergy that developed out of that, just with, I mean, I put out some casting notices with the local agencies here in Dallas, and got a lot of really talented actors that came in. You know, I told everybody, look, no one's getting paid here. I'm not getting paid. There's no money in this. You know, it's a labor of love. You know, and they're willing to do it for, you know, resume credit and, you know, something a demo that they can use to show somebody. But just it was that sense of, hey, we're all building something together. And now I'm excited as I'm redirecting my energy back onto Seed again, because that was 2014, to do that for the live action. And I'm already starting to see it. I posted a few things on Facebook recently. Hey, you know, anybody that knows how to do this or that or whatever, and people are starting to connect. And, you know, to me, it would be like the coolest thing. I don't even have the book. I left in the car. I wanted to show you. It was the definitive making of the first Star Wars movie, 1977. It's like this thick. And whether anybody out there likes the movie or not, doesn't matter. If you have a creative talent and you're interested in making something of it, you've got to read this book, because the author of that book basically takes you through every department that had to be assembled to make this movie that nobody believed in, Star Wars, for like $13 million. You know, I mean, when you see actually how I probably watched every documentary on how that was made. I mean,
you're the only, listen, I have to tell people this. I think we were at dinner one night and you tell the story about how I don't remember all the details, but something about the trilogy annoyed you. And so you re-edited your own version of Star Wars that was palatable to Rob and you burn copies of your re-edited version. You put those on your shelf, and when you watch Star Wars, you watch the re-edited version that you like better. And I can honestly say that is probably the most singularly unique Rob Skiba story that I have, that most people don't know, that to me is just like quintessential Rob Skiba of who he is.
That's funny. Well, short of trashing Judd Burton right in front of him without knowing it's Judd Burton.
That's so funny.
Well, to be clear, that's the prequels, not the original trilogy, but the prequel trilogy with Jar Jar Binks and all that.
You got rid of Jar Jar, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few scenes that are unfortunately necessary to carry the plot forward, but that you have to have them in. But yeah, I took a lot of stuff out that was stupid and goofy, and then stuff that was in the special features, you know, that were cut out, I put back in. And now I love it. I watch the prequels. I'm like, man, this is awesome now.
I just, you know, it's funny because I get online and I just see all these fights, you know, and everybody that trashes you. And I'm like, man, if people just, how can people not like this guy? Like, it doesn't even matter. The dude re-edited Star Wars to his own liking. Like, it's just like, if he ever gets something on his mind, he's going for it. It doesn't matter
I'm going for it, man.
There's no money in that. It was about the integrity of the project, and to you, they screwed it up, so you fixed it. You know?
Right on, dude.
I love it, man. I love it.
That's it. And I'm hoping, you know, when I look at the making of the original first movie, and you got guys out there when the beginning of Industrial Light and Magic, I mean, you want to talk about a ragtag crew of just nobody's getting together. I mean, the Death Star was basically plywood that had model parts glued to it, and they're driving by on a Jeep, you know, hanging out. That's their Steadicam, right? It's just awesome what they did. And Ben Burt, the sound designer for he's done a lot of movies since then, but you know, he was brought on for Star Wars. You know, the guy's out there, he bangs a wrench against the guide wire to a telephone pole, and it goes. He's like, wow, that's a cool laser beam, you know. And he walks by. He's carrying a stand that had a microphone on it. It went in front of a speaker, and it goes, you know. And he's like, so that's the lightsaber, you know. I'm like, I love that guy. You know, this the way he was thinking, and I was that guy as a kid because I watched all those special features. I watched that guy, and I started thinking that way. I remember like in 7th grade walking down the hallway, and the heater system or whatever was making this crazy sound. I'm like, man, that's just cool. So I went out and bought this really pretty expensive for me. Tape recorder. It had a stereo recorder on it and recorded that. And shortly after that, I think it was Hurricane Andrew, came through town. And literally, I mean, like my neighbor's tree uprooted down the street. But the thunder and the lightning and the sound effects were so awesome. I was literally on my porch in my parents' house, holding on to the porch with one hand and recording the storm with the other, and actually ended up using that sound effect for several plays that I ended up doing later for when Jesus died in the Passion plays I was writing. And that was a sound effect, was the hurricane. But when I did the audio drama, okay, I got all these voices from all these actors sitting here in my studio. But that's really dry. I mean, that you want to talk about just boring. I mean, it's really dry. You don't realize how much just the sound your feet makes on the dirt is important to making whatever you're looking at believable. And, you know, even after I had sound effects and music to it, it was so dry. And I realized, man, that just the ambient sound is necessary, you know. So, I mean, I'm out there recording myself walking.
I took a speech class one time where we had to create an audio drama as a project. And I remember thinking how difficult it was to make something sound believable, because it was, it's that ambient sound that your mind doesn't even think about, but it's necessary for you to be sucked into the moment, you know?
When it's not there, you definitely notice it. And in the beginning of Seed, especially in the audio drama, I have my soldiers are driving through like in a SUV through the desert of Iraq. And I'm like, what am I going to use for that? Well, my wife's car developed some kind of problem in the wheel bearing in her wheel. And it was a Toyota Camry, right? And so I was going to take the car in to go get it fixed. But the sound that it was making when I was driving it to go get it fixed, I'm like, that's perfect. That sounds exactly what I need. You know, like the interior of like a Humvee or something, you know? So I'm just driving around with my car recording the sound. So when you hear it, actually, that's the sound of a Toyota Camry with a bad ball bearing or whatever. But it sounds like you're in a, SUV driving through the desert, you know?
Like when you actually are able to start doing like stuff that you want to do for Seed, like where it's actually like filming and stuff, are you looking at doing, I mean, you're gonna have to do like a lot of CGI, right? Is that something you're prepping for? Is it gonna be mostly like CGI based?
Well, there's gonna be a lot of CGI just because of the content that's being depicted. Like the rewrites, I just finished rewriting the first 3 scripts literally yesterday. And I say finished, you're never finished. George Lucas once said, nothing's written, everything's rewritten. So, I've done another rewrite that'll probably require many more, thereafter. But with the rewrites that I've done, the format that I'm following with Seed is the keys to the future lie buried in the past is the tagline. So again, the comic book format, same thing with Lost. You got the action in the now, but there's always something in the past that's being referred to and you leave on a cliffhanger, right? So my past stuff, the stuff that's from the past, is going to be predominantly in the teaser, whatever happens before the opening title credits. And so I'm trying to formulate my thoughts, okay, because I'm going all the way back to the first incursion, in my opinion, only incursion, in Genesis chapter 6, is the opening for episode 1. So, I got 200 Watcher class angels landing on Mount Hermon, right? And, they're taking women and going off and, it's just chaos and everything like that. And then the teaser ends with this woman giving birth, and it's a very large child, and it ends up having like goat legs, like a satyr, So there's stuff like that, that I had already written and I've tweaked a little bit. But as I'm getting closer to like the flood and telling the flood and some of those things, I'm looking at this, the clash of the Titans, the end of the 500 years where the first offspring of the Watchers would kill each other off. I don't know if you've seen the movie Wrath of the Titans.
Yeah, those are pretty good. The new ones, talking about the new ones. I don't know if there's an old one.
Yeah. There's a scene, if you remember, in the second movie where Perseus is running through the woods and there's like this 36-foot Cyclops is like grabbing trees and trying to, get him, and it's this whole battle in the woods where, there's this giant trying to kill this guy. Well, if you can imagine that significantly amped up for the teaser of episode 2, that's what you're going to end up with. I mean, the last 3 giants are battling it out to the death to end the first generation Nephilim. And
hey,
so
hold that thought 1 second. I think Tom, you got to bounce, right? Are you bouncing?
Yeah, I got to bounce, man. I'm gonna have to listen to the rest of this tomorrow. But Rob, I just have been thinking about, man, we got to have Rob. As soon as Jared told me that that you're working on seed, I was like, man, we got to have this guy back on and talk about this, because I was excited about this years ago, and that was 2010 when we met. I can't believe it's been 7 years.
You believe that?
So yeah, I know. But one thing I wanted to ask is, where do you want to be in a, just looking ahead a year from now, where do you want to be in the production with seed?
Yeah, well, it's all going to be dependent on him bringing the resources. But this is what I'm seeing already. I am seeing his favor, like, just unbelievable. I mean, I'll just post something and poof, resources are there. So if that same favor carries forward into the crowdfunding side of it, and to be comparable to everything you're seeing on TV right now in a comparable genre, I'm looking at 1.5 to 2 million minimum per episode to have the same production value that you're used to seeing. And if it's less than that, the only comment you're going to get was, that's cheesy, because we're used to a certain production value. So that's what's going to be the big thing. How quickly that comes in will determine where we are, in the future. But I'll tell you this, if we end up with, let's say 100,000, with that, I can probably assemble a fair amount of my core group that need to get paid, storyboard artists and, casting directors and different people that are necessary for the pre-production side to just get the ball rolling. So, it's really going to depend on him. If we do a crowdfunding campaign, let's say in July, and we find that we've raised the money by the fall, well, then we're in pre-production by the end of this year and going into production next year. It could happen that fast. I mean, it just takes the resources,
Right.
And, I'm sorry you have to go now, but you and I should definitely reconnect and let's talk about it, because I got to build my team, and it'd be easier if I have a team of people that are on the same page I am spiritually, for one. For two, I don't have to educate on the subject matter, like, you already get it,
Right.
So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that would be amazing. I'm excited about you doing this. And I remember, trying to explain it to my buddy years ago. I was like, this is like, the only way I could explain it's like a Christian X-Files, but it's, it's got all this stuff and Bible and Nephilim and history and, so, man, this is exciting. And we're just praying, Lord, open up the door, for this to happen. This is going to, I think the important thing about this, and we all understand, I think I might have saw a Derek Gilbert post recently where he said the reason why nobody is interested in the Bible, because nobody knows the truth about the Bible and the exciting parts of the Bible.
Yeah.
So if people knew that, man, this is the kind of project, TV series that could draw people into God's word like never before. So this is exciting, man. But great to have you on. Can't wait to talk to you again, and can't wait to see what happens with Seed going forward, man.
Well, for sure. Thank you. I'm going to start updating this as seedtheseries.com. So is to contribute. C is to see what's going on. I have got to update this. It's been a long time since I have. But I'm showing you this because if you click right here on the read the pilot script, I've put the first two of the recently rewritten scripts online just yesterday. So, if you click on that, it takes you right. So if you're interested in reading the story, as it is right now, it's right there. Boom. And some people are like, well, what are you doing? You're going to put that on? I'm like, look, I've registered it with the Writers Guild and it's copywritten and I'm talking about it here. So somebody's going to be crazy to try to steal my material because it'd be so easy to, to get them. But I want to put it out there so people know what to expect, and see if there's something that they're interested in, getting involved with or whatever. So, that's up there now. That's the first update I've done on the site in a long time. And of course you can click on other stuff to see what we did before.
Well, I'm looking for, like I said, just like Tom, I'm a big fan of the whole seed thing, and I'm super pumped about the possibilities of it coming to fruition. I think, one thing that I like is, since Tom and I spend so much of our time on like the darker side of Fringe, we're not just Fringe, we tend to live the dark side of Fringe, which is why I think Tom and I like to have a good time on the show, because if we're not laughing with each other, usually what we have to deal with makes you want to cry, So
sure.
It's like, one thing that I'm acutely aware of is, a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes in Hollywood and a lot of the dark background of shows that are out there. And some people don't even realize the dark spiritual energy that comes along with some of the projects that are presented, even if they seem innocent. Mm-hmm. And for instance, have you ever watched that documentary on Netflix, Dark Souls? Or no, Lost Souls. It's about the making of the Island of Dr. Moreau.
No, wow.
Perfect example, right? Richard Stanley's the screenwriter. This is going to blow your mind. This is where I'm going to talk for a while, so I apologize.
Yeah, well, let me write it down while you do. What's it called? Dark Souls?
Lost Souls.
Okay.
All you got to do is, it's on the instant queue. All you got to do is, just search for Island of Dr. Moreau, and it'll be the only documentary about it that pops up.
Wow.
But, okay, here's what it is, right? So I never read the book. I didn't know it was a book. I was like 9. Let's see what. It came out in 1996, so I was 10 years old. I looked in the paper. I was living in Deerfield, Illinois, and not too far from where I was living at the time, there was this old drive-in that had the speaker boxes. I mean, it was like you didn't tune in your radio, to the frequency.
Yeah, hook it on the window.
Oh, dude, yeah, it was old school, man. It was as old school as a drive-in gets. It was falling apart and everything was rusted, but yeah. I didn't go there very often, but I looked in the paper, and that weekend they were going to show the Island of Dr. Moreau with something else. And I begged my parents, and I remember we went, and I was too young to really get it. I was definitely too young. It looked interesting than it turned out to be for me, but that was that's something that I clearly remember was my excitement about the idea of these chimera, animal monsters that violently took over the island. However the story happened, I don't even completely remember. So I saw this documentary the other day, and I was like, man, I remember that from my childhood. Let me check this documentary out. I didn't know anything about its history. Well, Richard Stanley comes on, and he was a big fan of the novel, and he adapted it for a screenplay. And he had done a movie called Dust Devil. He did another movie called Hardware, which were B-rated horror flicks. And he was known as being a good director, but he had never done a movie that had a real budget. He was always barely scraping by trying to get his work out there. So what happens is Richard Stanley ends up pitching this idea of making the Island of Dr. Moreau into a movie to some people that he knows that are a specific producer in Hollywood. He liked the idea. Long story short, they get it greenlit. He's going to get a $5 million budget. It's going to be a moderate budget sci-fi film for 1996, right? Nothing special. We're just going to make it decently. It'll be the biggest budget he's ever had, though. It turns into Bruce Willis is going to be in it. They're getting Marlon Brando. The budget goes from $5 million to $35 million. The thing cascades, turns into a rolling snowball. Before you know it, it's this whole thing. Now, Richard Stanley, what's his name? Roman Polanski was supposed to direct it at one time, and it was just it turned into this huge thing. Richard Stanley, though, was the screenwriter. He wasn't going to do anything else other than the screenwriter. So when Marlon Brando decided to be in the film, and this is where it got really interesting for me, because I had no idea that I was fixing to be introduced to an occultic story. Richard Stanley made no bones about it. Richard Stanley, by his own words, says that he made it mandatory in the contract that as the screenwriter, he demanded a meeting with Marlon Brando. I think that was Marlon Brando. I think was supposed to play Dr. Moreau. I think he did. I haven't watched it in so long. Anyway, so Marlon Brando apparently was notoriously difficult to work with, and he was very upset that Richard Stanley demanded a meeting. And so what happened was Marlon Brando made his disgruntlement very well known to the upper ups in Hollywood. The meeting still proceeded, and the studio sent a representative to make sure that there was peace between Richard Stanley and Marlon Brando during the meeting. Now, Richard Stanley showed up at Marlon Brando's house, who at the time lived next to Jack Nicholson, and Richard Stanley was very nervous about this meeting because he didn't understand why Marlon Brando was being so hostile to the idea of meeting. And Richard Stanley just wanted to preserve the integrity of the novel, and that's all he wanted to do was just talk about the artistic direction of the character. And he called his friend, right, who lived, I think, in New York at the time. His name was Skip. Skip was a biochemist, but he was also a warlock. And he tells Skip, "Look, you've got a reputation for being able to fix things, right?" And he says, "You think you could throw some hoodoo my way, help me out?" Well, Skip's like, "You got it." So Skip, by Richard Stanley's own testimony, convenes a coven does a bloodletting ritual. Now, it could have been darker than that. Richard Stanley didn't seem to have a real understanding of what Skip did. But it sounded like, by Richard Stanley's understanding, that Skip let his own blood, drew a bunch of signals, convened his covenant, had like a ritual of some sort where it was supposed to feed good energy right into the project. However that would be freaking possible, I don't know. It's an oxymoron. So anyway, that's what happened. Richard Stanley shows up at Marlon Brando's house the next day after this ritual's been done. And the representative that was probably going to hinder progress falls asleep. Marlon Brando cranks up the thermostat. She falls asleep, right? The representative, she falls asleep. Marlon Brando and Richard Stanley hit it off. And Marlon Brando comes out of that meeting telling the studio, if Richard Stanley's not an active part of this project, I walk. I love this guy. And Richard Stanley equates the bond that he shared with Marlon Brando at the beginning of the pre-production of this movie, to a blood ritual that happened by Skip and his coven. Wow. And Richard Stanley talks about how when they went to Australia to shoot it, things got off to a rocky start. He ended up dealing with he had a nasty case of sleep paralysis where he dealt with some crazy stuff in his hotel room, and he chalks it up to a nightmare. But he refers to it as old hag syndrome or sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. And as the story unfolds, you'll see how the entire project falls apart. Chaos broke out. The actors could not get along with each other. Val Kilmer came in. Marlon Brando came in. They made a mockery of the project. Richard Stanley got fired. They brought in some a-hole director from someplace else that just butchered, didn't care about the project. Richard Stanley just goes off with a bunch of Aborigines in Australia smoking a bunch of pot because his career's ruined. And it was just this amazing story, dude, of how it's become known as one of the worst movies of all time. And I do not see it as a coincidence that it started with a blood ritual. Wow. It was just a fascinating documentary.
Wow. Oh, while you were talking, I looked it up. I got it on my queue on Netflix. So I want to
hear what you think when you go watch it, because there are probably three main areas. It's not all about the occult, but just the way it's so casually thrown in there. It's just a part of the story. I mean, Richard Stanley tells the story. It was just a part of the story. And towards the end, you find out that his friend Skip, as a biochemist, I guess he did something with radiation. He had a clay wall that they think was too thin. Ended up getting radiation poisoning of some sort. His bones got so brittle, his hips started falling out of the socket. It was just crazy. I mean, whatever they tapped into, man, it locked on. Greg Reed kind of talks about it as playing Russian roulette. Not everybody that does that ends up triggering the anger of the bear. But in my opinion, whatever Skip did that night, playing Russian roulette with a ritual, whatever attached itself to that project was big, and it just wreaked havoc and chaos. It's interesting, just interesting.
Yeah, well, that kind of thing. I've heard of similar things actually happening on Christian projects, not necessarily with a blood ritual or anything like that. Although there are people who will try to sabotage, things like that, and I'm obviously aware of that. With everything I've been doing as well. And so, talking about what we're talking about now in this project, people all the time, well, how can I help? How can I get involved? And, unless you actually really have the talent and the skills that we're looking for, look, we're trying to find already skilled people I don't have to train. I want to find people that already know how to write. They already have the software. They already know how to edit. They already have the software. They know how to format. They get all that already, That's what we want. But the other people, we're not just trying to push you aside. There's still stuff that people can get involved with. But one of the main things coming at it from a biblical worldview is prayer cover. Having an actual dedicated team of intercessors going to war. I mean, that's rear echelon support right there, supporting the ones on the front line. That is probably more important than anything.
Well, because you're going to have biblical truth in it, and there's sort of it's going to be fun. It's going to be super cool. It's going to look great. But the only reason, from my understanding, that you're really pursuing it is to put the truth out there, and it means that the secular world is going to take it and be interested in it. So what it is it's a Trojan horse in a different way than we normally see it. Usually it's the outside world throwing Trojan horses at Christians. You know, in Christian culture, and here you're taking something Christian, you're making a Trojan horse, and you're putting it out into secular culture. And if anybody understands what goes along, you know, the spiritual warfare that goes along with a project like that, it's Tom and I, because Detestable just like to whooped us. I mean, from every angle. And I'm not even complaining about it. You knew what it was when you were going into it, but it's like the same thing. Not that I'm equating us to UFC fighters or boxers, but you know, you're going to the ring. You might have a feeling like you might feel like you're going to be victorious, but you know you're not getting out of there without taking some hits. And that's really the way it was. It was like, okay, if we're going to do this movie, like we just know we're going to get hit, but okay, I'm in. You know, I'm down. We're adrenaline junkies. Let's get in there and let's go to war. You know, and so you get in there, you take your licks, you take your bruises. Not passively. I mean, obviously we were throwing bows, you know, we're throwing bows back, and made that movie, came out the other side with some bruises and some scrapes and some scars, but we're doing good, man. And you know, part of that though, the only reason we survived that really was because of prayer cover. I mean, we had so many people praying for us, and like there was so much fasting and stuff that went into that. Like, you know, prayer cover is the most important thing for a project like what you're talking about. And that's what's so great about you understanding that, is that it'll be incorporated in the production of the movie. Which honestly, I'm a big believer in charged objects. Like I think that sometimes in a spiritual environment like that, the project can be charged with the Holy Spirit and actually be more effective out there in the real world.
Exactly right. What you're talking about and the strategy that we're trying to employ with this came as a result of watching the first Thor movie, and I enjoyed it. I love all those Marvel comics and movies. I love that stuff. And a lot of times, if I really enjoy a movie, I go into the movie for the first time just to turn my brain off and enjoy it. You know, if I really liked it, I'll go see it a second time to figure out why I liked it, because I'm going to dissect it from a technical. Is it the writing? Is it the music? Is it the actors? Is it the directing? Is it special effects? What is it? Why did I like it? You know, I'll do that a lot. And with Thor, that was one of those movies that I did that. I was like, okay, I really liked it, so I'm going to go back and check it again. Why did I like it so much? And what I came out of there actually grieved, because, you know, here's this movie. It was made for like, I think it was 150 million or something. Gross is, you know, in the billions, right? Or at least more hundreds of millions, if not in the billions. And I'm frustrated because, I mean, they have the same story we do. The Son of God saves the world. Problem is, it's the wrong son of the wrong God, you know. And at the same time, you know, Thor's out. You know, you got these other, you know, barely B-rated, you know, barely B-quality Christian movies coming out, you know, on the marquee at the same time. You know, you got like these big budget movies here, and you got this little, you know, God bless them. You know, I'm glad they're doing what they're doing, and there's a place for it. I'm not trying to knock them, but you know, you got your typical Christian movies made for $1 million or less. You know, maybe you got lucky and you got 5 million, maybe. But all it's doing is preaching to the choir. No one's going to that movie except the church nearby. You know, that's it. All you're doing is preaching to the choir. And I know a lot of Christian filmmakers, and they get into the business because they want to use their talent to be evangelical, to reach people. But the problem is, Paul says the carnal mind cannot discern the things of the Spirit because they're spiritually discerned. So when a secular person goes into a Bible movie where some, usually with the bad Southern accent, is, you know, always, your Bible says, you know, all through the whole movie. You know,
so true.
They've checked out, man. They're like, why did you invite me to, you know, this doesn't work, you know? So I was really struggling when I was in the car. I was praying. I'm like, God, what is the deal? I mean, why is it that, you know, we have this powerful message, Son of God saves the world. Best we can get is 3 million, maybe 5, for a movie that really nobody's going to go see except the church.
Unless you're Mel Gibson.
Well, yeah, and you have, and you have 25 million of your own money to put into it, and you know, his reputation and, you know, all that. Yeah, there's an exception for you. But even that, it's hard to call that your typical Christian movie, because they're telling the biblical story. So you can get away with biblical epics. You know, I mean, there've been in the past some pretty decent ones, and there's been some bad ones too. But, you know, that's a biblical epic. You know, you're going into it to watch a story from the Bible. But when you're trying to tell, you know, modern stories and parables and stuff like that, I felt like the Lord was saying to me, when I was just so frustrated by that, is that I have to become as good at telling the truth as they are at telling lies. That was like the commission that was given to me. And I was so, okay, what does that mean? You know? And so I started to think, well, how does the enemy tell lies? He doesn't do it in a 90-minute movie or a 2-hour movie or an episode of television. He does it little by little. He does it with cool special effects and all that stuff.
Dude, it's mythology, right? I mean, if you look at mythology being the key of understanding the mystery schools, when you look at how many different versions of the same character are out there telling the same story in different ways, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. Bingo. Cut to the chase. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just praying that way right now. I'm like, give me the creative juices that I need to be able to do that. Because look, I'm an evangelical person. You know, you can't hang around me without hearing about God. You know, it's almost like God Tourette's. You know, God, it's like, you know, it's just gonna come out.
God Tourette's. I'm gonna borrow that.
You know, and what I'm trying to do is I'm convinced that people don't go to the movies, nor do they watch episodic television to be preached to. You could go to church to be preached to, or surf to TBN if you want to be preached to. You watch episodic television, or you go to the movies because you want to be entertained. And the enemy knows that. The enemy's preaching to you all the time, but they're doing it through entertainment. And, you know, when you start, I've started to go back and rewatch the old original Star Trek, you know, from the 1960s. And seeing the secular humanist agenda that was being pushed there. Now, there's some good moral tales in there too, make no mistake. But there's an agenda every filmmaker has an agenda. I don't care what it is. They wouldn't be making the movie if they didn't. You know, whatever story it is. You know, pick a movie. Napoleon Dynamite. You know, the most ridiculous, stupid movie I think I've ever seen in my life. But they had an agenda for that movie. You know, whatever their goal was, they made it. You know, they're telling a story. And so for me, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I tell culturally relevant stories that illustrate kingdom principles in a venue that the world will actually be and want to see, you know, tune in. And, you know, I've got a decent sized audience right now, but for the most part, it's Christians that are watching. Because I often wonder, have I sabotaged my own goal by being on the public scene doing what I'm doing? And I don't think so. I think the vast majority of the secular world has no idea who I am. So all the stuff that I do on shows like, you know, with you and other people where I'm just spilling my guts and telling you, this is the goal, this is the mission, this is what I'm trying to do at Seed. They may stumble across it later on when they, you know, who's the guy that made this show or whatever. Whatever. Let it be what it is. The show in and of itself is designed to be, all science fiction is loosely based in fact. That's why they call it science fiction. There's a premise that's real and true that they then extrapolate on and then turn into some kind of fantasy story. So from that perspective, Seed is fact-based fiction with a biblical foundation, but I'm also consulting a lot of ancient texts, you know. And I just got the book Reversing Herman by Dr. Michael Heiser.
Yeah, I want to get that. I got Derek's book first because
it's a good book.
You read Derek's book?
No, the one I'm reading right now, Reversing Herman. It's a short book. It's you know, Heiser and I have our issues certainly, but you know, he writes good stuff. And I'm reading this book, and he's making the case that, and a strong case, for the fact that the biblical authors regularly consulted other stuff and used it in their own Holy Spirit inspired writings. You know, where Paul is quoting, you know, Greek philosophers, or Solomon's quoting something. I was reading something in one of the, I've got a book on the creation epics of the ancient Mesopotamia, Sumeria. Mm-hmm. And it has, like, you know, Epic of Gilgamesh and all of those types of stories in there. And I forgot what one it was after, I forget the name of it now. I'd probably butcher it anyway. But I'm reading through it and I'm going, wait a minute, that looks really familiar. Certain phrases that were used. And then I looked in the Proverbs and found almost or Ecclesiastes, I don't remember which, but one of them Solomon wrote, like verbatim. I'm like, dude, he was, you know, of course, you know, the influence that he had in his life, you know, various cultures and the women he was with and whatnot. But they are consulting other material to tell Holy Spirit inspired material. And I'm going, well, that's what I'm doing. So there are things that you'll see in seed that, if you're paying attention, are biblical seeds, but there's a lot of stuff that's going on just in general in the world today and capitalizing on various events that have happened around the world, weird UFO sightings or whatever, that will make its way in there. But there'll also be things in there from like the Sumerian epics and stuff like that. I try to be well read, in this type of material.
Well, a perfect example of what you're saying is what you brought up first, and that's Caesarea Philippi. I mean, Jesus, it was taken for granted that they all understood the concepts that Jesus was like all throughout Scripture, like even in Derek's book. Something that was interesting is he talks about the Tower of Babel in a way that I haven't heard talked about before, where not only was it a tower where you this Enmerkar figure, which I think is just another name for Nimrod, was building this tower. It was an artificial mountain to reconstitute a divine council, right? And it was a really interesting idea. But not only that, but it was known as the Abzu something, which was also called the House of the Abyss, where they made sacrifices at the bottom, the Lord of the Underworld, which, as we all know, was the Nakash after he lost his glory in the garden. Yeah. So it was like, wow, here you have this like story that's talked about, at Babel, and we see the basics presented. But when you study the historical facts surrounding that, what we have extra biblically, it makes a lot more sense because the political, temperament of the time, the political temperature at the time was such that if people don't understand the backstory, the story's worthless. And history has just been lost in the wind. It's biblical history surrounding what was taken, like the Caesarea Philippi. Jesus was standing at the base of Mount Hermon, so to speak, at the Grotto de Pan, saying that the gates of hell, he's going to build the church on this rock and the gates of hell won't prevail. He's standing at the mythological gates of hell, and he's, but he doesn't have to explain that there because everybody understood it. Everybody understood the backstory.
Yeah. Everybody knew it. And that's one of 7 gates, actually, the one at Caesarea Philippi. Probably a dominant one, obviously, because of the location right at Mount Hermon, for that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so many things, and it's one of the reasons why I advocate for the Book of Enoch is because, here you got Moses right in the Torah, right? Genesis chapter 6. Okay, you're not very far into the first book of the Torah when he throws the word out Nephilim. Never feels the need to explain it or elaborate on it. Everybody just goes, oh yeah, okay, we know. Because they clearly had an understanding, whether it's oral tradition or written, of the content of the Book of Enoch. There was no question.
Well, and see, that what's so interesting about God bringing Moses up on the mountain like that was, especially at first when Moses and I think it was Aaron, and they brought up 70, the 70 of the leaders from Israel, where they all went up, and then we all know what happened in the sky. That's so interesting, right? That Exodus 20, is it Exodus 20 something? What is it?
The commandments is Exodus 20.
No, where did it happen though? What was the chapter where Moses and Aaron were brought up on the mountain where they had dinner with God? They ate and they drank.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's okay. If it's not 20, it's somewhere real close to that.
It's real close to there. Yeah. Anyway, but I hadn't thought about it, but that was really the first time since Enoch where God was convening on a mountaintop with mankind once again. And not only that, but he brought up 70, right? He brought up that magic number 70, that represented the number of the divine council that he had, I guess, lost or whatever, maybe. And it was this whole message to the spiritual world of reconstituting a divine council once again. It's just like all throughout Scripture, and that was sort of a new revelation to me reading Derek's book. But, even having read Michael Heiser's book, The Divine Council, and going through and really seeing where the Bible really elaborates in these areas where, we've lost this, that's okay. Michael Heiser's point of that book was to show people that we've lost the supernatural worldview that we need to read the Bible. We need to have a supernatural worldview like the Israelites had when we read Scripture, or else the meaning and context is lost.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping to bring a lot of that out with this series and do it in a way like Echo and Lost. Yeah. It's not going to be in your face, but it's going to be all over the place.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so you obviously are going to have some artistic license though with it, right? So you get to add your own Rob Skiba-isms and stuff. So as far as like the weaponry is concerned, are we going to go more like futuristic with the weaponry? Are we going to go primeval with the weaponry?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mention that because there's a scene where I'm trying to depict like the days of Noah, And I happen to believe that dinosaurs, there was a class of dinosaurs originally created by God in the creation account. I believe that. But I believe some of the other varieties, like the Velociraptor type T-Rex stuff, may have been genetically engineered. That's my opinion, based on other stuff that I've read, Jubilees, Joshua, stuff like that. So I've got the scene where like this T-Rex is coming through this village and he's just like eating people, and then the centaur-like dude comes around the corner and he's got like this staff that has like this jewel on the end of it kind of thing, and he zaps the, so it's sort of Stargate-ish in that sense, so there's that's in a pre-flood context. In today's modern time, they're going up against Azazel in episode 1 with conventional weapons. Obviously not going to work. Didn't work. Whole team got wiped out except for Zach. But then in the cliffhanger for episode 2, which was the Kaz Dodja scene that Rick ended up reading for, I had this idea that, okay, if the ultimate agenda is to kill the one coming on the white horse, Yeshua in the last days, Russ Dizdar all about, what's it, R1919?
Yeah, Revelation 19:19, where the armies of the,
right.
They're all gathered together looking up.
Right. And 16:16 too, I think. I think there's like 2 places, but 19:19. So I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. If the armies of the world are gathered together to make war with the one on the horse, who's coming from the spirit realm, the only way that's going to work is if you have weapons that work on spirit. Conventional weapons aren't going to work against spirit, right? So, I mean, you could think Ghostbusters, right? So I'm going, okay, so, well, in order to have the weapons, you'd have to have a developmental stage where you're trying to figure out how to create weapons that will work against spirit. Well, Kaz Dodja, the reason I chose that one is because if you read the Enochian text, it says that he taught the art of smiting spirits and also killing babies in the womb. That's where abortion comes from him. But it says that he taught the art of smiting spirits. So I'm going, okay, well, just take my own creative imagination, creative license on that. And I'm going, okay, well, in order to do that, he'd have to have a way of experimenting. So this is why I have the scene where he's literally extracting the soul out of a living person, right? And they end up in this container. And I did this research on the Jed columns. That's where Jedi actually comes from, I believe. But did you see X-Men Apocalypse, that movie?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out, but I haven't watched it since.
Okay, well, there's a ton. That's the Nimrod story right there. There's a ton of stuff in that movie, including when the whole temple.
I was not able to enjoy that movie. Like, I wasn't able to watch it a first time just to enjoy it. I sat there the entire time hitting my friend, like, "Do you get this? Do you see what's happening here, man?
Did you get it? Yeah.
Do you
Yeah, well, if you remember when the people rebelled and they caused that temple to collapse on itself, hopefully to kill him, when he's doing the transfer and he's transferring his soul to another person, the pillars that they hit that kind of start the collapse had a drawing on or painting on them of a Djed column. Now, if you look at it, that's all dealing with souls and stuff like that, and it almost looks like a Tesla invention of some sort. It's kind of this tall tube with rings around them and like this mushroom top on it, the Jed columns. So I've got the scene where Kaz Dodja is doing his thing to this victim, and when the soul gets extracted, it ends up in this holding tank that is like being contained with these Jed columns. So I'm totally using creative license, but it's based on actual historical precedents. And so, this is my way of saying, okay, this is how Kaz Dodja is working with DARPA or DARPA's working with Kaz Dodja, however you want to say it, to develop weapons that will work for the R1919.
Interesting. What about, are we going to see like, like the cherub in the garden had a flaming sword, right? So, are we going to see like a take on a flaming sword that's not ripping off Star Wars?
That is the hardest thing to come up with, man, because especially after the most recent episode 7, where you've got the flaming sword with the side, it's like, they've already taken it, It's gonna be hard to do something that's hasn't already been done, in that regard. I currently don't have a scene for that, although I have an idea from my childhood friend, my friend Mike. He's always had this vision of, in modern times, digging up Eden and releasing that cherubim, kind of thing. Which the way he described it to me, the imagery in my head, the way I picture it is really awesome.
So are we going to also have like, I don't know what the original script called for, but did you have sort of like space themed warfare that you've now rethought?
Oh, dude,
all the flat Earth stuff. Are you looking at?
That's a big part of the rewrites that I just had to do, because I had a whole lot in there in especially the first 3 episodes. That was very spinning heliocentric, globular Earth based, mentality. That let me just say that's gone.
Really?
Yeah. There's still some of that in there that I'm leaving in for a reason. That shows the standard cosmology, but I'm much more interested now in the other side, if for no other reason, just to remain true to the ancient text. In fact, I got a book right here. If you haven't seen this book yet, you got to get it. This book is awesome. This is The Giants Were Upon the Earth, The Watchers of the Nephilim, The Biblical Cosmic War of the Sea by Brian Godawa. Basically, what he's done with this book right here is he compiled the appendix from all of his other books. All his other books you see right here. He's got like Noah Primeval.
I read Noah Primeval back. Yeah, book one. I read that one on my Kindle.
So it's a fictional story. It's a novel, but at the back of his novels, he's got an appendix where he gives all the reasons for why he did what he did and the things that he put in there. And what I noticed very quickly going through these books is that he wrote these books from an enclosed world cosmology, because he recognized that all of the Sumerian text very much support it, the Enochian text very much supports it, and the Bible supports it.
That's true, because I've only read that one that you're holding, but Noah went all the way down into like Sheol or Hades or Tartarus or something. I don't remember what the terms were he used, but they went all the way down pretty much to the abyss and did some fighting, which only really makes sense in the with biblical cosmology.
Yeah. So you don't have to. I mean, all the books that he's done, I think, are really cool. But if you're just interested in the sort of the facts behind the fiction, get this one, because he took the appendix from each of those other books and put them together to compile this. So when I was first getting into the flat Earth stuff, my friend Brian, that I grew up with, best friend and through high school and everything, he saw what I was doing with the flat Earth stuff. He goes, dude, he doesn't like to read, but he loves to get audiobooks and listen to audiobooks. He's like, dude, I just got this audiobook. Have you ever heard of Brian Godawa? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. In fact, Brian, I hope still, I've had some meetings with him, has been on tap for being one of the writers for Seed, because that dude gets it. Really, he does.
You're saying Brian Godawa gets it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Is he a flat earther, or is he...
No? But this is where I'm going with it. Is my friend Brian was talking about Brian Godawa's stuff, because he got I think it was the Noah book, or it might have been Enoch Primordial on audio, whatever it was. And he's like, dude, you ever heard of this guy? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, he's talking about what you're talking about. I'm like, he is? He's like, yeah, all his books are from a enclosed world cosmology. So I'm like, really? So I had his books, but I hadn't read them yet. So I started flipping through them and looking at it, and I started looking at his appendix. And he's like making a slam dunk case for the enclosed world cosmology, which was unanimously held in the ancient world.
In that book is the one you're talking about.
Well, in each of the appendix of those, but this book, he just compiled them all together.
Gotcha.
So I call Brian, and I'm like, okay, dude, I got your books. I got your compilation of your in your thesis and all this, and you are, he's talking about the firmament and what the pillars of the earth. I mean, he's got a whole section on the pillars of the earth and what that meant to the ancients and what the firmament was all about to the ancients. And he gives scripture references. I mean, he's saying everything that I've been saying. I didn't realize that he'd been doing this for a while. And so I'm like, dude, and I'm trying to get him. Are you a flat earther? And he's like, no. He says, I was just trying to stay true to the ancient narrative. I said, but how can you be that thorough, have that much information, prove it without a doubt that that's what the biblical authors believed and that's what everybody else believed, and not at least want to look into it? He's like, well, science and NASA and blah. So
NASA.
Yeah.
Ah!
So we had an interesting conversation. He's like, I like you. He's like, you're crazy, in a good way.
And regardless, this is what drives me crazy. I mean, Tom and I are of the same mind. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever do a Flat Earth episode because there's been so many Flat Earth episodes for everybody now. I just feel like there's nothing I can add to this whatsoever. I don't even know completely what I believe other than the fact that, it's an interesting subject to me. And just the math alone has been fascinating. I think that was the point where, when I remember we argued a little bit at Joe Taylor's museum at Crosbyton because that was around the time. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, man. I remember I had that guy Larry Scott, right, on Facebook pretty much asked me that question, like, how do you know that the planets are what NASA says they are? This was before anybody talked about flat Earth. This was before it was even like a thing that was going mainstream. And I remember he just challenged me, like, why don't you do a scriptural study on it? And I was like, yeah, cool. So I started doing a scriptural study, and I found that the only place in Scripture was in Hebrews where anything was translated to worlds, and like 31 other times it was translated to ages. And so in that passage where it said God's the God of all the worlds, it was like, no, he's talking about the ages. God's the God of all the ages. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I went back to Genesis, and I was like, let me really look at the creation account and see where the planets fit into this. Because I have no concept of flat Earth at the time, zero concept of it. So here I'm just trying to make sense of this one nagging thought about planets, because something to me was not right. And it came on the tail of a prayer that I prayed when I had gotten really, really far into the Nephilim stuff and mythology and, just the whole thing. And I was just like, God, but I still feel like I'm missing something. Like something is not right. There's still something that doesn't make sense. Like, I just want to know the nature of reality. Just show me the nature. Please just show me truth. And then that whole planet thing came up, and it was more confusing than anything I'd ever looked at. But as I found no evidence. I looked at the creation account. I got weirded out by the progression of the way things were created. I'm thinking, well, planets were just thrown in here, with the stars or something, just like everybody does. Somehow you just chuck them in there. It doesn't talk about it, but they're there. That's probably when it happened. And I was fine with that. And anyway, long story short, though, it just said, I remember you were sitting at the table, and I was pretty much convinced at that point, for whatever reason, that NASA had been lying to us about planets. And I'm the only guy that I know that sat down and read Richard Hoagland's book, the Mission to Mars, Dark Mission, or whatever that NASA book was that he wrote. I read that whole book before I'd even questioned NASA. I was just studying the occultic roots of most of these big government-fueled organizations. And I understood that NASA had occultic roots. And regardless of Richard C. Hoagland or not, I've never figured it. Everybody's got a different opinion. He made one of the most dynamic cases for the roots of NASA being completely occultic. So I already had that in my mind, that NASA was full of a bunch of sorcerers and alchemists. And alchemy, essentially, when you really break it down, is about changing a person's perception of reality. So I've got that already primed, and the wheels are turning there, wondering, well, what is NASA's agenda? Because I still believed in the universe is the paradigm that we've all been taught. But now I'm having to question, can I trust anything NASA puts out? Because NASA, I had come to the conclusion that NASA was telling a story about their God in the same way that all NASA to me is modern mythology. The way they name all of their missions, they have their mathematical coordinates. Everything is mythological to some extent, which all goes back to the Nakash and Nimrod as far as I'm concerned. So I'm sitting here, I've got this fueled up, and then I have this doubt about the existence of planets because I can find no evidence of them in Scripture. And I feel like everything else is presented in Scripture, but I don't see this. And I remember we were sitting there, and I was like, what do you think about the idea of maybe planets not being? And I remember it was the same. You had the same reaction that I had initially. Was, I have looked through a telescope. I have seen the lights in the heavens. Like, what else would they be? And I remember it's so funny for me to look back on 5 years ago, Rob Skiba.
Oh yeah.
And then I don't remember, you came at it. I remember we talked about this one time. You came at the subject from something else that led into planets. I started with planets and moved into flat Earth. I don't remember where you started though. Where did you? Because you came from the opposite end of the spectrum.
Well, obviously, a lot of people were sending me stuff on Facebook. I'm like, I had the same reaction everybody had. Come on. And then I made the mistake of downloading the podcast Gons and Basil did with Mark Sargent on my way to do my taxes. I had an 1.5-hour drive. I listened to it. I'm like, wow, crap, that kind of made sense. So I came back, and then right after I listened to it twice, a friend of mine comes to town, and John Gabrielson, he's the one that does a lot of the Future Congress, not Future Congress, Back to the Future conferences in Austin. And we were out to eat one day, and he goes, Rob, we're on a globe, right? Yeah, of course. He goes, how does water bend? I said, what? He goes, how, the globe is 25,000 miles circumference. The math is 8 inches per mile squared. So how do you bend the Pacific Ocean around the globe 8 inches per mile squared? I'm like, gravity? I don't know. And then there was that nagging thought, and then it was like 2 days later or whatever it was, a day later, I had Mark Sargent on my radio show, and that was one of those shows where I did a lot of talking too, because I'm like, okay, what about? And his challenge to me, I don't remember if it was on the air or off the air, but his challenge to me was, okay, fine, Rob, because I kept saying I believed in the Neil Adams expanding Earth, globular Earth theory, and he said, fine, prove it. Prove that you live on a globe without using NASA, the government, or the military of any nation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't do that because the first thing I did was, well, we all seen the pictures, from NASA, right? But then when I looked into that, the one that got me, the one that just, I was like, what? Was on JPL's website. I see the Galileo space probe, 25-hour time-lapse rotation of the Earth, and none of the clouds are moving. It's 25 hours, the Earth moving, the clouds aren't moving. And I'm going, what? And then I look into, my iPad still has the default background on it when I bought it, and it's the 2002 Blue Marble. And when I started looking into the Blue Marble, because I had heard somebody said that they're using the Photoshop cloning tool on the clouds, and when I did it for myself and analyzed it, I'm going, holy cow, it's fraudulent. And I don't think, I think it's that same one that has a kind of a C-shaped cloud formation right up around Nova Scotia. It's like a backward C with a tail. It's got a little thing underneath it. I started seeing that Earth everywhere, like in TV shows, movies, visual. In fact, I use it for the Yahuwah Triangle conference. I did the virtual conference in December 2014, and Rick Hummer did all the intros for me. I have that exact globe doing the intro for the Yahuwah Triangle conference. Well, so I'm going, it's a composite image. It's a 3D model. It's not real. And at that point, on the planet side, I did the same thing you did. I'm like, okay, I'm going back to the creation account. Where is it? Planets are nowhere to be mentioned. King James uses the word planet, but incorrectly. It's in 1st or 2nd Kings. But if you look up the Hebrew word that is translated in English as planet, it's Mazzaroth. Well, that's not the word for planets. That's the word for the zodiac, Mm-hmm. And so, and the closest thing we have is the reference that Jude gives of wandering stars. Well, it says wandering stars that are reserved for judgment. Now, people say, oh, the wandering stars, that's just their word for planets. Well, but
why are planets being judged?
Why are planets being judged? And have you seen the Guardians movie, the new one?
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now think about it when you go see this movie, if you go see it. The idea that the planets are sentient beings. I'll leave it at that. Idea is that planets are sentient beings, because that's what Jude says. These are wandering stars that are reserved for judgment. And that goes back to the book of Enoch, talking about the heavenly luminaries as a class of sentient being angels, that there is a special place of punishment for those that held not their initial estate, that they were supposed to stay in a formation, because the Mazzaroth tells a story. So if the Mazzaroth decides to start jumping around, and it changes the story, it'd be like meddling with the Gospels,
Well, it's one of those. See, that's right. That refreshes my memory. You started with flat Earth, and it led into the planets thing. I started with planets, and it led me into the flat Earth thing. And I remember we came at it from different ends of the spectrum, but it led to the same. It led to the same idea. And people, they'll ask me sometimes, like, what is it going to take for you to believe that the Earth is one way or the other? Because I won't dogmatically sit there and say I believe it's flat, and I won't say I believe it's a globe. I have no idea what is going on right now. My paradigm. The thing is, I thought it was going to be easy to disprove years ago, and it just I walked away with so many more questions. And my see, here's a problem that I have from my own experience. This is just me. Because I'm not even trying to talk about flat Earth, like, oh, this is what I believe. I mean, nobody cares what I believe about it. It just is what it is. People that have done the research, they've made up their mind one way or the other whether it's interesting or not. I definitely think it's interesting, and I will never not publicly say that. These are questions that need to be asked, because if you look at history from an occultic perspective of this one being that's lying to everybody about himself, why would this thing be off limits? Like, here's one problem that I have. I'm a big fan of the history of the Nephilim. I'm a big fan of that study. And what I understand is that for the longest time you had people walking with the offspring of angels, and this is what they believed. They built things we couldn't build. They had a better understanding of everything than we see. We're backwards engineering everything we can find or dig out of the dirt, you know, because we can't make it ourselves. And yet it's only been in the last 500 years that we believe that we're on a spinning ball that seems to defy anything that we can do in a computer as far as a model. We can't reproduce anything we're being taught. It's only been around for 500 years, yet the flat earth is the psyop. Like, people say that the flat earth is the psyop and that it's illogical, but to me, logic dictates the other way around. Like it would seem like the psyop was instituted for some reason 500 years ago, possibly. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong about that. I mean, I don't know one way or the other, but then at the same time, you know, I started chasing the mathematical side of it, you know, looking at how can I, you know, in Lubbock, right? We've got a town not far called Level Land because everything is flat, right? It's like 20 miles away. And I listen to these old timers talk about the false and the true horizon. They talk about how, oh yeah, this town Lamesa, we could see it 60 miles away. You know, from Lamesa, we could see Lubbock at 60 miles. And I started doing the math on what they were saying they were seeing at 60 miles. We got nothing. You could see the bottom of the Sears Tower if it wasn't for the vanishing point and all of that. I mean, people were seeing entire buildings out here at 60 miles away that don't even come close to a building in Chicago at 60 miles. And unless light's bending around the curve, I have to ask myself, what is that about? If I'm intellectually honest, I have to ask myself as a thinking person, even if I'm not that smart, I do like to think, even if it doesn't get me anywhere. And I have to ask myself, what is that about? Is light bending? Well, if I hold now maybe this is just my ignorance, but if I hold a ball up and I shine a flashlight at the ball, wherever that line is, that light just comes right off the edge. You don't necessarily see the light wrapping around the ball, you know, giving me any images. I don't get it. Either I'm too stupid to get it, or it's just my common sense kicks in.
It's a magical mystery projector that can literally beam a city up and over a curve and look straight up and down, not leaning or anything for you. I don't know if you saw the posts that I did today. I did this guy. I had made a comment in one of my other posts that's a professional sniper in the Marines, and he was calling BS on the Coriolis effect with snipers, and he gives this long reason for why that's just garbage, you know. And the first time I heard that long range shooters supposedly have to adjust for the spin of the earth, I'm going, that's absurd. You're talking about shooting something that's maybe a mile or so away, half mile, whatever it is, in a matter of, you know, a second, you know, with a bullet that's going 1,700 miles an hour, right? And supposedly in that short a period of time, the Earth has moved under that bullet such that you had to compensate to hit your target. I'm going, that's just crazy, because when I was learning how to fly helicopters, you spend a lot of time hovering. Like, that's one of the things you really got to get down. I mean, you got to know how to do that. So you spend a lot of time practicing until you can perfect a 3-foot hover. So if you're telling me the Earth's moving that fast under a bullet that's in like a second, 1,700 miles an hour, the Earth moved that much, you have to adjust for a target? How come, like, when I hovered for hours, you know, at 3 feet, the next city or town or state didn't show up underneath me? You know, when I landed again.
You go to Joshua, right? God supposedly stops the Earth from spinning, right? Well, what about this wind shear? What about this 1,000 mile an hour wind shear? Well, God could have just stopped it too. Anything's possible for God. But why is it? Here's the deal. Here's my problem with people that can't even have this conversation, because I'm not even trying to be a flat earth apologist. Right. But what bothers me is that somebody will get angry at the idea. And I'll tell you where I'm going with this, because I see this in the occult all the time with programming. I did an experiment one day. What somebody will tell me is it's crazy to think that the sun is the thing that's moving. Ridiculous. There's no way. But when you ask them, okay, so God stopped the Earth from spinning, which would have ripped this place apart. The 1,037 mile an hour wind shear would have just, I mean, there's no comprehension for the kind of damage that causes. So what do you think about that? Well, God can do anything. Right. Why can't God make a sun that moves? And why can't we be lied to? You know, why is it ridiculous to think that God stopped the sun, you know, and that it's the thing that's moving, as opposed to, you know, why is it crazy to believe the Bible? Like, why can't we even have this conversation?
Hezekiah's example is even worse. Yeah, making the sun and moon stay still for a period of time during the day. Okay. Hezekiah made it go backwards
Yeah.
10 degrees.
Yeah, it's true,
so
man.
That means Earth stopped rotating, rotated backwards, and then corrected and ramped itself back up to 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, that one, I'm going, what? Well, maybe he just did a trick with light. It said that the sundial went backwards, and the sundial is dependent on the sun, angle of the sun. So
I did an experiment, right? And I don't know that it's really scientific or it could ever be used in a paper, but I started realizing, with my understanding of how people are programmed in the occult, and knowing NASA is an occultic organization, and I started looking at the way things had shifted to this global paradigm, right? As I started contemplating this, I just wanted to know, okay, if people have been programmed in a particular way without any sort of understanding of, epistemology, right? Why do we know that what we know is true, right? Nobody that I know has epistemologically developed an opinion about the curve of the Earth or it being a globe. We all just believe it. And as I am, interested in various theological topics and stuff, understanding why I believe what I believe is important. So I didn't have a problem when I was challenged with this to say, okay, well, let me go figure out why I believe what I believe. I had to do the same thing with soteriology and every aspect of my theology. I had to understand why I believe what I believe. And so I made it a point one day. I was like, I'm going to ask like 10 or 15 people. I'm just going to ask them that stupid question. How do you know the Earth's a globe? That's it. I got no agenda, man. I just wanted to see, the reaction. So I have a job, right, where like I meet a ton of people throughout the day, do a lot of sales, and I got people at accounts all over the place. And so I could ask 15 people easy throughout the day, completely from different walks of life, rich, poor. And
you should have had somebody videotaping that, man, with you.
Dude, I didn't know I was going to run to. Well, what's funny is I like asked this one guy, I'm like, how do you know? He's a maintenance guy, like a maintenance director in an account. And I was like, how do you know the Earth? I said, hey, weird question, bro. I was like, on a completely different topic. We were talking about something else, like the pond that they were building. And I was like, hey, on a completely unrelated topic. I was like, how do you know the Earth's a globe? And it was just like, what? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's not a complicated question. Like, how do you know that we live on a globe? And he was like, we just know. And I'm like, but how do you know? We just know. And then it was just like, what was funny, it was like, but how do you know? And then he gets angry, right? It was anger. First, so what's funny is throughout the day I do that. And I ran into like maybe six people that were just like, maybe it was like only 5 people. They were like, yeah, we just know. And I'm like, how do you know? That's interesting. I guess I've never thought about it. I don't know. I mean, because they tell us.
Awesome.
Like, have you? They're like, because they tell us, and we've learned it, and so we've got, It's like 5 or 6 people were like, that's interesting.
Because I have this in my house.
Well, what was funny was those people were cool because they were like, yeah, it's really interesting. Like, how do I know that? I'm gonna go look. I'm gonna go look it up. The next time I talk to them, they talk to me about Greek experiments, and that's cool, man. Like, I got no dog in this fight. It was just like you went and you looked up some stuff, you spent some time, you questioned it. Like, awesome, good for you. But then they were like, there was only what was it? The other, 10 people, 9 or 10 people. Instant anger. And to me, it was like, all I did was ask a question. I didn't challenge anything. I just said, how do you know this? And they were mad. And to me, that was when I sat back and I was thinking, these are firewalls. It's the same thing. Dude, I'm telling you, like, some people need to understand this. And I use this as a perfect example. It's something Russ has run into on several occasions. It is this, this thing with, a programming. It's a type of programming that happens when you have somebody that's being ritually abused. They sometimes have this process in which they make Satan look like the good guy and they've got Jesus looks like the bad guy through abuse. You have somebody that comes in dressed like somebody comes in and starts abusing the kid, right? And then they'll tell the kid to call out to Jesus to save them. They'll call out to Jesus. Jesus comes in. Jesus does no good, right? Jesus beats them, sexually molests them, whatever. And then after that, they tell the kid to call out to the devil. And the kid calls out to the devil, and then the stereotypical devil comes in, beats Jesus up, frees the kid, cleans the kid up. The kid starts developing this emotional attachment to a false paradigm, right? That's being constructed. And then when that kid gets out into the world, after he's part of this is just one aspect. There are a million different avenues this can go, and lots of different flavors to the occult. This is just a good example of a type of story that does happen. when this kid gets out of the real world, the way he's been conditioned, if somebody even tries to tell them that Jesus loves them, there is a firewall that comes up because they know that that's not true. They absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that Christian is lying to them because they know that Jesus is abusive, right? And that Satan was the one that loved them. So, they get angry. All you got to do is throw a scripture at them and they get angry. Because and that's what kept showing up in my mind was my experiences with people that had firewalls. What I saw was a firewall here with no rational or reasonable explanation for why somebody believed it. So, why were they so angry about defending it if they didn't even know why they believed it in the first place? So to me, it was just my own little experiment that showed me maybe I'm dealing with, because if you look at the alchemists and sorcerers, they change people's perception of reality. That's it. Knowing that is exactly what started NASA before any of this other craziness, knowing what NASA's history was. And I started asking people this question. It was just, they was like a hand in a glove to me. And I was like, I don't know what the reality is here, but on a completely different, from my own different and unique experience, I'm seeing something interesting, and that's when I really started digging into it.
I'm with you 100%. And I've often said it. You probably heard me say it. I'm like, if you want to see somebody get in touch with their inner psycho, just mention you're looking into this, because you're going to see it. And for people you would never, sweet old ladies, people you would never imagine completely lose their mind just at the mere suggestion or even looking into it in some cases. And that's what said to me, I'm going, okay, I never thought of it as a firewall, but what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. I'm going, well, there's obviously something to this for people to be responding on a spiritual level. It's manifesting physically, but this is a spiritual level issue, And when I saw it, I went back and forth through the Bible so many times, anything I could find that had any sort of reference to the cosmology of this place. And it's consistent, man, from Genesis to Revelation, without deviation. It's a circular, still flat earth set on pillars under a dome within which the sun, moon, and stars were placed on day 4. That narrative never changes through 40-something authors over 1,400 years. Not all of them talked about cosmology, but the ones that did kept the same,
because it's not like somebody's taking two scriptures out of context and just exactly. That's because you make a great point there. It's like when we go through the scripture, it's consistently this one biblical cosmology from the beginning to the end. It's not like, so for people that say that the scriptures that are being presented, we don't have to have a literal interpretation and be ridiculous. It's like, well, that would be true if we're only dealing with 2 or 3 scriptures, right? Because there are aspects of scripture that are poetry and absolutely 100% poetry, like well, without getting into that, any studies the Bible in depth will find that, especially in the Hebrew, there are books that are they're ingenious, the way that they're written, the way that they're structured, they're methodical, but there's a lot of artwork to some of the aspects of scripture, especially in the Hebrew. But it's not like we're just taking 2 or 3 verses and making this whole shift in the paradigm. It's consistent from start to finish. So
with dozens of verses, dozens, if not hundreds, at least dozens.
Yeah, it's just, for me, I think my biggest thing, I don't know that I even have a place like in the flat earth debate, other than I am who I am. I find it interesting, and I'm never going to sell somebody out because some people consider this divisive. They don't want to touch it. Well, I think every time I have this conversation with people, what I stress to people is, if you're mad about this, then you have not looked at it because it's interesting. And if you don't like the idea, then go disprove it, because it's worth having. Like, why can't something that, like, Tom is not a flat earther. And I tell people, I'm not going to be a flat earther until I can see it. Somebody's got to get me high enough where with my own eyes, no cameras, I'm looking at the thing, that's what I want. And until that happens, I'm just going to reserve my own judgment to, I don't know, but my Bible tells me this, and this is an interesting subject. But that's really where I settle out, is with people like, I know probably maybe 30 flat earthers now here, all because of, hey, have you heard of this? This is crazy, right? It's stupid. Is it really stupid? And I haven't even made apologetic arguments for it. I'm just like, I mean, before you just make fun of a bunch of people, why don't you go look at it? Just go look at it and disprove it. And when they get past the firewall, when you get past the occultic programming, when you get past the NASA programming, you just say, I'm gonna go figure this out. Everybody comes back with questions. I haven't seen a single person that was being intellectually honest that didn't come away with more questions.
Let me show you something that goes along with what we started the show talking about seed. Because I've realized something, man. It's like I'm beating my head against the wall trying to prove things. You know, I'll come out with, dude, I've got like 110 flat Earth videos that I've done in 2 years, right? And you know, my videos aren't short. You know, they're at least an hour long. You know, many times 2 or 3 hours long. So I went out there trying to prove stuff. And for everything that I thought was a slam dunk, wow, I mean, look at this, boom, that's awesome. 50 yeah, but people show up to debunk it. Okay, so, and this cycle never ends. It just never does. And I got to thinking, well, I mean, the whole reason for seed in the first place was the commission? To be as good at telling the truth as the enemy is at telling lies. You know, if we assume that this is a lie, this was seeded into our life in the corner of the kindergarten room, you know, and has remained there through all of our school education, and then through every movie we see, every TV show. This is a seed that is constantly being watered, constantly. So if it is a lie, there's an example of how it has been seeded to the point where we all just believe it. So I'm going, the thing about science fiction that's cool and is pretty amazing, and I think is somewhat unique to science fiction, is the fact that people go into it suspending their disbelief. You know, you're turning your disbelief filter off when you go into science fiction. It's science fiction, right? So that means you're open to receiving whatever information the filmmaker wants to put in your head. And there can be no question, at least in my mind, that a lot of these more popular science fiction shows have had a massive cultural impact. Dude, I was in the Northeast, the jungles of Northeast India. This is where people live in grass huts on stilts, right? No electricity, anything. And through interpretation, I started making a game out of this. Wherever I was, in some of the most remote places, I would ask through the interpreter, do you know where the phrase, "May the force be with you," comes from? They all know it. Like, I'm not kidding you, man. That was like, and George Lucas made a statement. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, the church, which used to be all powerful, has been usurped by film. And he's right. You know, if these people know Star Wars, but have never heard John 3:16, how effective is the church by comparison to what the impact, the cultural impact, and all around the world? Every kid that's in an industrialized society has played with Star Wars toys, you know, if their parents could afford it, right? It's everywhere. The posters were all in their languages. It's everywhere, you know? So and let me just show you, I'll do a screen share again. Okay, so my goal with seed is to do that, to plant seeds, to suspend people's disbelief enough to put compelling images, because I could preach till I'm blue in the face about anything, and if you don't want to believe it, you're not going to. I could prove all the stuff that I think is slam dunk on flat Earth. It doesn't matter. But if I put it in a cool TV series, the next thing you know, you're going to have entire YouTube channels like this. Okay, this is one of a bazillion YouTube channels, right? This is the Star Wars Theory channel. All these videos. I mean, you can click on this and just keep clicking more, right? And it's all. Oh my
goodness, man! Look at that. It's just like.
And it goes on forever, dude. I mean, it's just forever. You know, it's stuff like, why doesn't Obi-Wan remember R2-D2 in A New Hope? And here's a 4-minute video on why he didn't remember him. You know, and actually, this is an addicting page. I've spent a lot of time here. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I start, you know, how did Palpatine create Darth Vader's suit so quickly? You know, I mean, but this is what science fiction fans do. Is the Millennium Falcon faster than the USS Enterprise? You know, this is.
Imagine if they turn their focus and attention to something like the scripture. That's
right. So you get where I'm going. if the storyline and the characters are compelling enough that it captures the imagination of people the same way shows like X-Files, Star Trek, Star Wars, did, then there will be YouTube users creating sites like, videos like this, trying to figure out the tree in the cave that I put there, or whatever. But then we're not fighting anymore, because I can spend all day long making videos of me with charts and graphs and maps and, cameras and angles and levels and compasses. And all I'm doing is fighting with people all day long. I've had some of my close friends that contact me like, dude, you got to back off, man. I mean, you're killing yourself. like how much time of the day do you spend?
I've seen it.
Oh, you've seen me lose it. You've seen me lose it, because I do. I'll go on these marathon 400 comment threads, trying to defend whatever it is that my original post was. And it sucks the life out of you, man. I mean, you get to the point where, I'm not suicidal, but you're looking at like the 12 gauge going, I wonder how that barrel would taste, but if I do it through something that I love, science fiction, filmmaking, and just put the questions out there, because that's what Lost did. Lost just put the questions out there. They didn't answer hardly anything. They sort of tried to wrap it up in the end, but the foot statue, you finally got the answer that it originally was an Egyptian god statue that when a tidal wave brought the ship in that they found in the jungle, it smashed into it, and all that's left is the foot statue. But for 4 seasons, you had no clue what the foot statue was, and you had people having online communities debating it and trying to figure it out. Well, that's the real way that I think I'm going to be able to actually make an impact with the things that I believe. I
think it's probably the only thing that's going to work.
Yeah. And my audience is not Christians. They're going to fight me forever. The biggest trouble I'm going to have is going to be from Christians. They're not my audience, though. They're not my audience. I hope that they will get behind it and support it, but they're not my audience.
Well, partly, too, because the truth has been neutered to the extent that when somebody starts proclaiming the truth, it sounds like Gnosticism. That's what I found. Like, when I start talking about to somebody who has no concept of any of the reality in Scripture as far as, like, the fringe stuff is concerned, with the Nephilim and the history surrounding the Israelites and, the whole thing. I'll just refer to it as the whole thing, you know?
The whole thing.
It's like, are we reading the same Bible, bro? Like we read the same Bible, because honestly, because Gnosticism has taken more of they've taken a lot of these things from Scripture and they've twisted it, right? But Gnosticism is presenting a lot of the same stories with a twist, which seem a lot more science fiction related, the way that they play out, more mythological. It's a lot, Gnosticism is a lot more intriguing to some people because they're unveiling mysteries but giving false conclusions, right? So, for Christians to combat that, you have to, that's one of the reasons why Ancient Aliens was so popular, because they presented facts and then twisted your mindset about pulling you into the wrong conclusions.
But what was brilliant about it, and I caught onto it because I saw a documentary with Eric Von Daniken talking about his book that started the whole thing, right? Chariots of the Gods. And he was saying how he was getting so much flack from Christians and all kinds of people about what he was saying. He says, but you didn't notice something that I did. You're assuming that I'm coming to conclusions. Now, he has his opinions, but he says, if you'll notice, I asked a lot of questions. And I forgot how many he said, but he rattled off this number of how many questions were in the book. And that's what the TV series does. If you go back and watch the series with a critical eye, you'll notice that they're not giving you conclusions. They're pushing a conclusion, but they're doing it by asking, could it be that?
Yeah.
Suppose that. What if? And that's the way they push the agenda, by asking a question that comes across as a conclusion, but actually they're really just asking questions.
Who was it? That's actually a new tactic of atheists. I can't remember what he called himself. He's a street epistemologist, is what he refers to himself as. I don't even remember his name, or else I'd let people go watch him. But that's exactly, see, what you're saying is interesting, because it's the newest, for me, it seems to be the most effective tool for atheists now poking holes in Christianity. Is as street epistemologists, you have atheists on the street that are just asking endless questions, poking holes, because a person has a lot of these quote unquote Christians have a a fractured and shallow foundation anyway. They don't really understand, because we've grown up in this secular world where the gospel is sold for $1 at the bookstore. You know what I'm saying? Like people become immune to it. And, whether or not someone identifies as a Christian, if they're not really Christian, but they identify as a Christian, all it takes is for someone asking the right questions that they don't understand to seemingly poke holes in what they think they understand. All it does is it opens up uncertainty, right? And so, you're right with the ancient astronauts thing, only asking the questions, they're just poking holes in the ideas that in preconceptions that people have, opening it up to uncertainty. They just make it look uncertain, which gets people's mind going. And we already have active imaginations, and you can see where that goes.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
So I'm trying to leverage the same general concept. I'm planting seeds. I call it, one of the reasons why I call it seed is because I'm just planting them. And one of the things that I learned as a missionary was, especially in China, they had a lot of very strict regulations as far as how we could evangelize. Some places you could knock on doors, other places you can't. And so what basically the rules were, if a national initiates the conversation, then you're free to have the conversation until they cut you off. If they're done, you can't push it. You can't push your faith. And so one of the strategies was, to figure out a way to get them to ask you a question that opens the door for you to do it. Well, for me, it was easy because I was walking around with a lot of camera equipment, with me. So naturally, people see some dude walking around with a lot of camera equipment. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so you asked me a question. I said, "Well, my job was," I told him, my job is to travel around the world and see what God is doing in different countries." What do you mean what God is doing in different countries? Boom, you kick the door open again. So, I would learn the technique of how to have this conversation in such a way that you're kind of leading them to get where you want to go. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to follow the same format. And what the coordinators told us when we got there said, don't go in with an agenda. Don't go in with the agenda to plant a seed, to water it, and to harvest it in a 20, 30-minute conversation. Just be whatever the Holy Spirit has you there to be. Sometimes you're going to be there only to plant a seed. That's it. And you're going to walk away. Sometimes you're going to go there and you're going to water a seed that somebody before you has already planted. And every now and then you may get the privilege of harvesting, but don't go in with an agenda. Just go in and be what the Holy Spirit wants you to be at that moment. So I'm taking all of the experiences that I had as an evangelist and a missionary and applying the same concept to seed. I'm just planting seeds. I'm going to water those seeds over the course of 6 seasons in 72 episodes. But ultimately the harvest is going to come from guys like you and other people that, hopefully you enjoy the show and your friends and family enjoy the show. Well, then you have the conversation because you have stuff in your head that that you'll pick up on just because we've done a lot of the same research. You're like, oh, I know what Rob's doing there, So you have, hey, what'd you think of seed last night? Man, that was really cool. Hey, what about when this happened? Oh yeah, well, and then you can water what I've planted, and I never have to preach.
Mm-hmm.
The real evangelism comes through the relationship that you have with your friends and family. I don't have that relationship. Mel Gibson, when he did Passion of the Christ, the evangelical leaders in the country they loved it. They thought it was a great film, going to be a huge, powerful film. So they were trying to pressure him to put an invitation at the end of the credit roll. Run Just As I Am or something at the credits, and have altar calls at the movie theater. And he said, no, this is a paraphrase, but he said, look, guys, that's not my job. That's your job. My job is to put compelling images up on that screen. Your job is to do the follow-up. And I thought, brilliant. That's perfect. So it's the same thing. I'm going by that same idea. I'm going to try to put compelling images up on that screen. It's you, the audience. It's your job to do the follow-up. So that really kind of summarizes the overall vision statement for Seed and why we're doing it.
Yeah, it's a good point probably to wrap it up with your final statement about Seed, because I think we could talk forever.
we could do another show on whatever.
Well, here's the deal. No, here's the deal. Because like I said, this channel has no agenda other than like Tom and I we just like you, we like having conversations. And with Detestable, we wanted to start producing like a bunch of stuff that allowed us to bring people we know, because there are a lot of people we know nobody knows about. We just have these weird connections where we're able to talk about some of this other stuff. But in the meantime, all this stuff is relevant. So we like just hanging out and having it. But what I want to do is I really want to go on Nimrod, because this thing came up with my buddy Greg the other night where I like a raving lunatic. I was not prepared for the conversation because there was no agenda. There's no preparing for these shows unless I read someone's book. You know what I mean? So with Greg, he says something. I don't remember how it went down. I was like, oh, well, I think Nimrod's the Antichrist. And then I realized I'm knuckle deep in a live stream, not prepared to teach about Nimrod the Antichrist. I know that there's stuff in Micah. I'm like, bro, there's stuff in Micah and Daniel and Isaiah and Revelation, but I'm not making any sense to anybody because I'm not. Greg's kind of looking at me like, I've never heard of this before. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm doing a show about it, and then I'm going to be prepared. And so I want to do one on Nimrod. You'd be a good guy to do that. Just talking about Nimrod as Antichrist. So think about that. We got to do that. And then I want to do one. I don't know, maybe you could do this or you can help me find somebody. I want to talk to somebody that has a much better understanding of the history of NASA. Not even for like a flat earth thing. Because like I said, I'm not a flat earth apologist, but I think it's an interesting topic. I like to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't shy away from it, but I just want to talk about the facts of NASA, who created it. Yeah. Who do you think, who's out there that could do a show on that?
Yeah, I could point you. Well, Bart Sabrell would be a good guy.
Hold on, let me write that down.
He's the guy that did A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild. If you saw those two documentaries, he's
how do you spell his last name?
Sabrell. I think it's Sibrel. I think Sabrell.
Okay, Bart Sabrell.
Yeah, he would be a good guy. But when I originally I wrote Babylon Rising and published it, I think it was in January 2012. This is when everybody was thinking about December 21st, 2012. And so there were speculative things in the first edition, because I published it before that. And of course, like other people, we were all speculating and wondering what could happen. And then when December 21st, 2012 came and went,
Spoiler alert, major letdown.
Yeah. Well, for me, it wasn't, because I came to the opinion that it was really 2 years earlier because our calendar's off. It was 2010. But be that as it may, when I, in 2013, sat down to do an update on the book, I ended up writing, I think it was about 50 pages of new content, and most of that was on NASA, which was so interesting to me now, looking back in retrospect, is going, wow, God was actually preparing me for Flat Earth, because so much of what I wrote in the update of Babylon Rising regarding NASA was exposing its occult nature.
I read Babylon Rising, the first edition. You gave me the second edition. I got it right here. I guess I haven't even. It's still like crisp because my other one's kind of like all worn out. But
chapter 4
in this one, huh?
It's chapter 4, One Nation Under God. That's the chapter that probably has the most added material, and that's got a whole section on going through Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. So, yeah. But yeah, Bart Sabrell would be a good one. I can't think of too many other than Richard.
If you think of anybody else too, I might hit him up. I don't know. I want to really talk to someone that understands, because right now I'm hot on the trails of some stuff personally with very interested in this concept of the crowned and conquering child right now that Aleister Crowley put forth in his book Thelema, and sort of which not I did a little video about this the other day, but a lot of this stuff that we do is for personal, right? Trying to understand what we're doing. It's not this. We're trying to get better about putting this stuff out there, because we get so many emails and messages now. It's just better to do a video and just do a topic, and then everybody can just maybe get something from it, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. But dude, so much came out of Aleister Crowley. Much came out of Aleister Crowley. The cultural, counterculture in the 60s that, got worse in the 70s, and then it led into full-blown satanic panic in the 80s. But like this whole idea of the crowned and conquering child being, everybody being childlike, opening up their mind to experience everything and anything that they want to. And with the this whole transgender thing is a byproduct of the crowned and conquering child. Transhumanism is a byproduct of the crowned and conquering child. Just so on and so forth, man. There's just so much there. It's just, I really want to talk, especially with NASA. I want to dig into the occultic roots of NASA, and somebody that understands Aleister Crowley's relationship to it. Maybe I'll just have to do some short videos too. Is that Bart guy? Do you think he could do that, or just talk? Does he pretty much just hit?
Well, his big thing was exposing the fraud of the so-called moon missions.
Right. He's the guy that got punched by like Buzz Aldrin, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. But he may have some insight into some of that stuff, because I mean, you go down any of those paths, those are the rabbit trails you end up hopping down. You know.
Well, if anybody's listening, which there aren't a whole lot of people that do, yes.
Well, I'll repost this. I'll
well, if you got 80-something thousand subscribers, Rob Skiba, why don't you throw a couple this way, bro?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Hey, are you posting this on your? Do you have a?
It's live streaming right now, and then it just uploads to the channel.
What's your channel called?
Through the Black.
Through the Black. Okay.
I'm
gonna post this when it's done on my channel, and everybody go to Through the Black.
Yeah, Through the Black.
Go to Through the Black, man. Watch his show. Watch it.
Yeah, subscribe.
Subscribe. Definitely subscribe to Jared and Tom. You both co-hosting.
It's called we co-host it. Like I said, it's weird. And now Tom and I are starting to do some more independent videos. But like we had William Ramsey on the other day, and William was like, because it's been less than 2 months. Channel's been open for less than 2 months. We've got like 150 subscribers. And it's just a way to push more content like Detestable, create a platform where we can get more message out and raise awareness about satanic ritual abuse.
Yeah.
So, if people aren't aware of Detestable, go check that out at detestablefilm.com. We got some big stuff coming up with that. But anyway, William Ramsey started laughing. He's like, man, I can't believe you guys have put this many videos out in just like a month.
Yeah.
It's a lot of content.
Now You See TV did the same thing, man. They just hit the ground running, and they got probably hundreds of videos up now. But you just do a little bit here and there, and it adds up.
Yeah, we're actually gonna do their show tomorrow. I like John. I didn't know much about John, but John seems like a really cool dude, man.
They are both really cool. John Pounders and John Hall, both really cool guys.
Yeah, I've never talked to John Hall, but yeah, we're gonna do John Pounder's show again tomorrow. He did our show not too long ago, but I look forward to that. So we'll man, I appreciate the shout out for the channel. And
all right.
I'll send you the link again. Let me get a thumbnail up and stuff where you go posting it. But I'll try to make it look pretty. And anyway, but yeah, let's plan on doing some more shows on some crazy stuff, because I love you, and I'm never going to kick you to the curb. Let it be known publicly that I love you, Rob Skiba. You are my friend,
Thank you.
The entire world can dump you to the side, but I'm never going to discard you because you're an awesome dude, all right?
Thank you. I really, truly appreciate that and your support. And you guys have been supporting us, and it really does mean a lot. Seriously, dude. Thank you.
All right, man. Well, we'll make this happen again for sure. So for everybody else, subscribe to this channel, go check out Rob's channel, like his stuff, buy his books. They're awesome. And we will see you, I guess, Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't know when we're doing our next video on our channel, but peace.